Our protagonist was a failure, and when his entire class was summoned to another world, he faced a small problem. In fact, it seemed like he was broken, because he kept getting summoned to the new world over and over again, and each time he was summoned, he gained a different power. The goddess who was performing the summons discovered it was because he had an extremely powerful soul, and after she managed to control his soul, our protagonist finally stayed in a fantasy world. All of his classmates who were summoned had only one power, but he had a total of 7 overpowered abilities. However, he could only use his powers at night. That's why people thought he was a useless failure and kept humiliating him. But as we can already imagine, he's going to rise above them all. Yet, to reach that day, we need to go back a little in time. Our protagonist realizes there was a woman with red eyes calling his name. His name was Inori, and she had her hand on his face. What is this woman doing here? But unexpectedly, she thrusts a blade into his heart. At the same time, it seemed like she was crying after doing something like that. Why did she do this? And how does she know my name? But in the next instant, he wakes up looking at a magazine. He was just a normal high school boy, and he was 17 years old. What had just happened felt like a dream. However, he was at school as usual. At that moment, a very bright light appears. The students were standing on top of a magic circle, and after a flash, an explosion happens. Am I still dreaming? He asks himself as he slowly fades away. And before he knows it, he's in a completely different place. It seems all the students had been teleported, but they thought it was just a prank. His classmates asked where the cameras were, and one of them says this feels like the novels he reads. At that moment, a deity appears, saying they are in the rift of the world. I am the one you would call a goddess. Our hero, who reads a lot of manga, didn't seem too surprised. You have been summoned to another world as heroes to defeat the Demon King. Yes, I know, it sounds a little too cliché, and even the heroes comment on it, saying it's nothing more than a generic story. Your souls will be transported to the kingdom of Hygen, the nation of Versa, a world ruled by sword and magic. Alright, where are the cameras? We already know this is a prank. Meanwhile, Inori said he had read a story quite similar. Our meeting will be brief, but before you depart, I shall give you a gift. And she ends up extending her hand over their heads. Each one would receive a unique and exclusive skill that would fit their journey, and so they all appear in a castle. When they open their eyes, they realize they are before a king, and it was a saint who had summoned them. Splendid. Praise be to the saint. The heroes have arrived to finally save us. At that moment, the king asks for silence. Everyone fell silent immediately. Greetings, heroes. I welcome you to our world with the deepest gratitude. This was Reason Hygen, sovereign of the kingdom of Hygen. After introducing himself, everyone kneels in respect, asking these heroes to defeat the Demon King. Inori, who was very used to these stories, found it all a little different, and one of the students tells His Majesty that he will not kneel. It was obvious he was a coward, asking if there was a way to return to his world. A woman appears saying she will answer that question. You may call me Isia, and yes, there is a way for you to return. In 1 month, we will have the ascension of the full moon, which will give you the chance to return to your world. Whoever does not wish to help in the war may go home. Unlike the novels he read, here you weren't forced to remain in the world, and a girl asks what they will do during that month, and if time will pass in their own world. The saint replies that when they return, they will go back to the exact moment they left. Basically, it's as if they had never come to this world. The final decision was theirs, to help the kingdom or not. But please, we ask you to consider it. We are all desperate, seeking help to defeat the Dark King. Inori was expecting some guy who thought he was the protagonist to volunteer to be the great hero. However, there wasn't a single nutcase willing to risk his life. The class representative says all the students would like some time to think, and the king ends up agreeing. I bet they were all scared out of their minds. With that, the king allows them to make this decision during the month they will stay there. And he even offers them a banquet. That welcome wasn't bad at all. After all, we know some isekai with much worse receptions. The boy was already imagining himself eating medieval fantasy food. However, under his feet, a light shines brightly. He thought it was a teleport to the dining hall, and even got excited, poor guy, thinking everything in this world is solved with magic. Hey, Inori, what's happening to you? The boy was the only one inside a magic circle, and he began to disappear. When he opens his eyes, he realizes he was in another place. He had been teleported back to that place with the goddess. The woman greeted the hero. Wait a second, lady, I've been here before. What? What do you mean? Yes, we've already met. And it was about 10 minutes ago. Not even the goddess really knew what was happening. Am I going to be sent to another place this time? The goddess said it was very likely, but that she needed to give him another power before sending him. And as soon as he receives the power, he is teleported back. This goddess really is irresponsible. However, this magic circle was no longer purple, but yellow. And when he opens his eyes, he is restrained in a straitjacket. There was a mad scientist saying the summoning was complete, and his assistant celebrates. They say this boy seems to have the so-called demonic eye. Of all the places to be sent, I end up in a place like this. For God's sake. And just by looking at this corridor, we already know it won't end well. He had been summoned to be part of an experiment. The scientists wanted to remove this magic eye from him. All of this to discover its true power. According to legend, when a human was summoned to another world, they would gain powers. And in our hero's case, he was very lucky to gain this magic eye. With that, the old man keeps saying it was his lucky day. I see. So this demonic eye was the gift I received from the goddess before coming here. The old man uses a hypnosis spell, but it ends up not working. It seems Inori's eye canceled this power, and the old man can't understand a thing. This was thanks to the power of the old woman who saved him. When she moved the hair from his face, she realized the boy had 2 magic eyes, and the old man already starts freaking out with excitement. Today is our lucky day. We have a test subject with 2 extremely powerful eyes. Looking at that scene, the boy realized it was his unlucky day. I'm screwed in this place. I'll never complain about traffic and slow internet at home again. The guy even started trembling all over, but unexpectedly, that teleportation spell light shone again. The scientists didn't understand a thing. Finally, they're getting me out of this world. And so, he appears there again. Huh, boy, you've already returned? What did you do wrong? I don't know, I just ended up here again. Are you serious? You have no idea why this is happening? The goddess said he was the first to go through this, and that she would investigate. And as usual, she gives him a new power before teleporting him to a new world. And so, he appears in a place. A young noble had summoned him with magic. An elf congratulates her lady, saying she is talented. And when he arrived there, they started treating him like a monster. They even wanted to make a servitude contract. However, he was teleported back to that place again. Good thing I escaped and here I am again. My god, is this kid never going to stop coming back here? She had discovered the reason he kept returning and would explain it quickly. In short, those who were summoned had powerful souls, as it was one of the requirements. But in Inori's case, he had an extraordinarily powerful soul, and because of that, he remained stuck between this goddess's room. What do you mean? I'm just an ordinary student. But in response, she said a person's soul strength is tied to their ego, and for him to stop being teleported, he must make a hero's contract in the new world. And so, he is transported to a new place. He ends up gaining the skill to steal abilities, and even thinks it's been pretty good traveling like this. Because thanks to that, he's gathering many powers. This girl wants to make a hero pact with me, and she's actually quite cute, but before he could make the contract, he was summoned again. This time, he ended up in a somewhat strange place, and there was a woman performing forbidden magic. The guy thought it was strange, and even regretted not staying with the last girl. And after a while, he kept jumping from place to place. This is getting way too boring, until he was finally summoned to the Demon King's place to lead the creatures. With that, he gained a very dark power. When he returns to the goddess's plaza, she says he is becoming incredibly powerful. That's what it seems, but I haven't even had time to test my powers. It's alright, the next summoning, I feel it will be your last. I really hope so. I can't take spending the whole day traveling between worlds anymore. Before he departs, she will merge his abilities, and tells him to check his stats with his right eye. When he arrives at a new castle, they welcome the noble heroes. Could it be that I was finally summoned to a decent world? When he looks ahead, he sees some students. However, they were not his classmates, but other people. They were all in their 3rd year of high school. They even looked confused, wondering where they were. While the 3 students talked among themselves, our protagonist sits on the floor. According to the prophecy, it was said that the heroes would be summoned in trios. However, there was one extra boy there, and he even realized he was the extra student who had been summoned. In other words, he had crashed the summoning, and regrets it. This guy here only gets into trouble. Talk about unlucky. The king notices there was an outsider, and points his finger at the boy. You 3 are heroes, but this other one was summoned by accident. He thinks it could be a bad omen, or maybe the god's luck. At that moment, the king's daughter calls for the heroes. I am the first princess, and I was the one who personally summoned you here. Just by looking at this girl you can tell she's full of herself. And in a very conceited way, she was welcoming them to the kingdom of the rising sun. This world was inhabited by various races, and was at war against the demons. The Dark Lord created his own kingdom and began invading human territory. That's when the Empire of Makard, an ally of this nation, asked for help. However, only someone of royal blood like her could perform the summonings. Her plan was to form an army of summoned heroes and train them to save this world. And she gets all arrogant while telling this. Wait a second, she wants to build an entire army of summoned heroes? So more people will still arrive, is that it? While the students were feeling uneasy, our hero was angry. The boy who was summoned said he wanted to ask something. He wanted to return to his world, which surprised the princess. Then she said there was no way, and the 3 students froze, thinking they were doomed. Honestly, you should be thanking me for giving you this opportunity to become a hero. This girl was a spoiled one. Just wait and see how clueless she is. I'm already starting to miss the kingdom I was summoned to, the first time. In an even more arrogant way, the king says to move to the next stage and give the hero's blessing confirmation right away. A hooded figure arrives with an artifact, and as they touched that item, their powers were activated. Ryuto had the blessing of Limit Breaker, Aoi Isogai, Magic Barrier, Tameki Karasawa, Mana Affinity, and our dear Inori Takafuji, Detection. Oh, I see this intruder also received a blessing. The guy thinks this detection power is useless. After that, everyone had to take physical and magic aptitude tests. Ryuto stood out in the physical tests, while the 2 girls did perfectly in the magic tests. But our protagonist looked like a complete useless case. No way, I gained several powers traveling between worlds. How can I be the weakest? He even ended up being pushed aside, completely excluded. At night, they invited him to Ryuto's room. Our boy compared that room to his own and said he was being left out. One of the girls said they shouldn't have called Inori, since he's not even a hero. Wow, did you have to say that out loud? But just by looking at her, you could tell she cared about others. She was just pretending to be arrogant, and he even jokes in his mind, saying she can't hide things. Negative, Inori can be very useful thanks to his detection skill. Apparently, each one had a different opinion about our hero. In fact, he had no fighting ability, but he could be a powerful tool. Aoi agrees to use her barriers to protect him if needed in battle. Poor Inori kept comparing himself to the other summoned ones, saying they were strong and good-looking, and they start suspecting the reasons they had been summoned. By analyzing the students, our hero said they seemed trustworthy, and he noticed they were suspicious of the people in this world, so he asked them to be quiet. And he shows a notebook written that they were being watched, so they couldn't say anything that would draw attention. They all start to get worried. If we were summoned to another world, we'd definitely be doubting these people. But our hero could tell they were being spied on because of his detection, so he explains how his skill works. He could detect the presence of people within a certain radius. That's why he realized there was someone spying from the door. Before they entered, they had asked the maids to leave. Then someone came back to try to listen in. So he asks Aoi to create a barrier to block sound. She thinks it might be possible, and starts casting her spell. It wasn't easy, but it was proving useful, so they would need to talk quickly. The other guy starts flirting with the girl, saying she is very talented. This simp does this in front of everyone. I can't believe it. Let's focus, guys. We're being spied on and we can't take risks. The hero's blessings were powers that, if they fell into the wrong hands, would cause great damage. That's why they were being cautious. The girl said they didn't ask for any power from the people who gave them. In response, Inori says those people are desperate, and judging by his other experiences, he said this kingdom must not be doing well financially. He said that because he had already been to another kingdom that seemed much richer, but of course he didn't tell anyone. And using the detection skill, he noticed the castle didn't have many guards. A girl said the food was actually tasty, and although it wasn't very expensive, it was well seasoned with garlic and other spices. Seriously, they liked that food? It was the worst food I've ever eaten. And when he thinks about his room, he keeps saying it's very simple, and that he hadn't noticed it much before. Unlike that first kingdom that was rich and luxurious, here everything was very simple, and analyzing it well, it was better for them to escape this kingdom. The main concern would be how to return home. The princess said it was impossible to return to their world, but he thinks that's a lie. She could be lying and hiding the truth. That way the kingdom's only hopes wouldn't be able to escape. The guy says it makes sense, but they were still weak and couldn't run away from there. A girl approaches him and says that now she noticed his eye was weird and had a yellow color. That was very suspicious, and he had slipped up by not being able to hide it. Pretending to be a cool anime character, he said it was a secret he wouldn't like to talk about. The other guy said that Inori was in that stupid phase where the boy thinks he's the protagonist of an anime. Exactly that phase where you think you're cold and calculating. If you haven't gone through that yet, you can be sure that phase is coming. Inori said he prefers to be teased than to let them find out the truth. Back in his room, he tries to understand how his powers work. Because of that magic eye, he could see a window with his status. The value seemed high, but he had to know the average of other people to understand if he was really strong, especially because he had done really badly in the aptitude tests. Whatever, I'll check my abilities. He had many powers, and the power he got when he came to this world was detection. But other than that, he also had powers from other summons, and one of them was the vampire power, which basically turned him into a non-human. And because he had turned into a vampire, he had a sun god curse, and that was why he became super weak during the day. And when he ate the garlic seasoned food, he thought it tasted awful, and he even remembers when he first saw the girls. Normally he focuses on something else, but in this case, he kept looking at the girls' veins. That's because he had turned into a vampire, and because of those magic eyes, he didn't even realize he was no longer human. All this because he had been summoned several times. There were still many abilities left for him to finish reading, but he would start by mastering the detection ability. Then he tried the ability to modify forms. He could use his mana to turn any material into weapons, and he does that with a candle. And there was our big guy, holding a knife. He could also use his demonic vision eye, which had several attributes, and one of the specialties was being able to see magic circles. With his left eye, he could record the spells from enchantment circles. It wasn't very easy to understand how that worked, but he was going to train, and he still spent a good amount of time reading all the abilities. He also had one called Drain. When he drained enough energy, the person would turn into a zombie, but if he used a bit of power, they would become a vampire. That would be useful for him to make an army of people. The guy even gives an evil laugh, saying he had become a real monster. Indeed, guys, turning others into your servants was really broken, and the crazy guy had some overpowered abilities, but during the day he was completely useless because he was a vampire, so he would first have to get used to his body, and he does that through training. They were in front of a commander named Egiana. She would be the new combat instructor, and the big guy wonders how it's possible for a woman to be the commander of the knights in a medieval fantasy, so it meant she must be very strong. But before learning how to do spells and enchantments, they learned basic combat. They would have to do simple training until they could master the abilities completely. Ah, really, this is what we have to do? He was in a bad mood, since the other students had really high status. Tamaki had mana affinity, and Aoi, although not that strong, could make magic barriers, and it seems that he's the only one who can see this status window, not other people, especially because if they could, they would see that the big guy there is a vampire. The commander says that they will be able to choose their combat specializations after training. And as for Inori, who was the weakest, he would do intensive physical training. No way they're going to make our big guy suffer in the sun. The guy looked like a dried plum, and the commander didn't have a shred of pity. It was a nightmare for a vampire to be training under the sun. Meanwhile, she thought the boy was slacking off. If he kept going like that, he wouldn't have the strength to escape the place. Next, the greeting princess appears along with another blonde woman. My god, that annoying princess again. But who's that behind her? She's actually kind of cute. Since the blonde behind her was with a maid, he already imagined she was from the royal family. She's pretty, but she has a forced smile. It's obvious she's a fake woman. The commander says it's a surprise to see your highnesses, and he understood that blonde was also a princess. She gives a slightly fake smile, saying she was just passing by to see the heroes training, and the other one, who's more showy, keeps saying she's witnessing the people she summoned, and that they should feel honored. Not even our big guy, who had a lot of patience, could put up with her. At that moment, the second princess speaks, saying it's a pleasure to meet Inori. She said she's the second princess of the Sun Kingdom, and keeps smiling. And she also said she would be his private tutor during the day, and so he begins studying the history of this kingdom. He will have private lessons with this beautiful girl. I'm kind of embarrassed to be in a room alone with her. Meanwhile, the other heroes had classes with the first princess, who was the one who summoned them. Earlier, she had said she wouldn't waste her time with someone who wasn't a hero, and for that reason, wouldn't give classes to the excluded one. Thanks to that, he was there, taking classes with the second princess. I'm telling you, that little blonde over there, besides being showy, is annoying. I thought she was a fake princess, but she's actually very polite. During class, he wanted to ask a question. He wanted to know if she was younger than the first princess. Although that girl seemed quite young, she was the first princess, meaning the eldest. Smiling, she said no, it was the opposite. In fact, she was older than her sister. However, some things happened, and her younger sister was named the heir. Since political matters were complicated, he decided not to touch on the subject. He was even very curious to know about it, but decided to keep his mouth shut. And time went by, and he learned more and more about the culture of this people. He also learned the story of a sorceress, who was one of the heroines that defeated the first demon king. She was so important that a religion emerged in her name, and from then on, the queens have been sovereigns. Their husbands, the kings, act as rulers of the kingdom, as if they were regents, and in the end, it is the queens who make the main decisions, and can even divorce the kings. Basically, it was a feminist government, and the guys could be treated however they wanted. Together with the second princess, he learned about history and magic. However, some parts were boring, and he would fall asleep. The scene shifts to a little later at night. The princess said she would have theoretical magic lessons, and she even lent him the book so he could analyze basic spells. What was striking was that she always gave a somewhat fake smile, and didn't care if he slept in class. That wasn't a smile of joy, and she seemed to be pretending. In the end, he was able to read the books to analyze them, and he activated his Eye of Magic circles. He could record the exact patterns of the circles in his mind, and activate them whenever he wanted. But when he tried to activate the magic, nothing happened. He tested this by recording several spells. None worked, so he closed the book disappointed. However, he ends up remembering something, and tries to activate the spells with his right eye. It didn't work, so he thought about copying them, and he realized he was able to record in his mind all the patterns of the drawings. It would be impossible for someone to memorize those drawings just by looking once. He understood that he was able to record in his mind the hypnosis magic from that scientist, and besides recording, he also nullified the magic. After a few seconds, he drew it on a piece of paper, and said he would try to use it, but now he would do it in a different way. He touched himself and called the maid. The woman appeared asking if he had any requests, and he said he would like her help with something, and so he activated his hypnosis magic. And it worked. The woman was hit by the spell, and now she was hypnotized. Inori ran his hand over her face to see if she showed any reaction. Then he asked what color clothes she was wearing underneath. The woman said black, and he confirmed it using his X-ray vision. That ability was actually pretty cool, and comment here if you'd like to have a power like that. The hypnosis magic worked because of the Eye of Magic circles. While one eye stored, the other released the spell. And just think about the possibilities of what our protagonist can do with this power. It's one of the most overpowered abilities I've ever seen. If true, he would only be able to use advanced spells, as simple spells didn't work. But to be sure, he wanted to test it other times. When he was summoned to other worlds, his red eye observed several spells, so he could remember them, and he tried to store them in his yellow eye, and that really worked. He tried to use a teleportation spell, and ended up in another place. The guy was discovering his powers, and becoming overpowered. He managed to be transported exactly to the place he imagined, and under the moonlight, he thought about how easy it was to escape the castle, so he was going to take advantage of that night to test his other abilities. He used the black magic circle, and realized he could levitate lifeless objects. It wasn't that hard, and moreover, he could store them inside his shadow. He couldn't directly interfere one object with another, but if he wanted to make a stone pierce a tree, he just had to deactivate the magic when it was about to hit the trunk. At the same time that it was practical, it was also complex. But the best of all was his shadow magic. The guy could simply disappear out of nowhere and not leave any traces. And the most overpowered thing of all is that he could appear anywhere. That was amazing. He starts testing how his other spells work and transforms stone into a weapon, making it turn into a powerful sword. He still had other abilities to train, so he spent some time in the forest. The next morning, he went to train for commander and used his red eye to analyze all the teacher's movements. And at night, he used the movements he had copied. He couldn't fight before, but with this power, it became much easier. And after practicing, he became incredibly agile. The guy was extremely tired, and a status window appeared. For having spent the entire night training, he obtained Sword Mastery Level 1. So that's how things work. If I practice a skill, I'll level up. He heard a noise and realized there was a monster in the forest. Since he had an identify power, he decided to check the creature's status. This monster had relatively high stats, and he knew this bird was rare and valuable because of its feathers. And he even wonders how people in this world managed to hunt this strong bird just to make pillows. So with that, he started hunting other creatures to train and get stronger. But it seemed he wouldn't be able to defeat any of them. So he didn't know if it was because he was still weak or the monsters were strong. That's why he would have to strengthen his attributes first. The scene returns to the palace of the Rising Sun Kingdom. The commander was walking through the palace corridors when she found Her Highness walking alone, and even told the girl it was dangerous to be in the dark without a guard. But before she could say anything else, the princess interrupted, saying she would like to talk about something. She was informed that Inori still had not used the magic artifacts, and the commander confirmed, saying that the other heroes hadn't used them yet either. But with Inori, it would take longer. However, the princess wanted the artifacts to be presented to him right away. But the commander said that Inori is still too weak, and if he used the magical artifacts, it could hinder his development. I believe you, princess, are worried about this, but I know it can be harmful. The princess lets out a sigh, and right after that she smiles, saying she understands this, since the commander is the most powerful woman of humankind. It seems the commander felt sad to see this fake smile from the princess, and she even says that her smile had lost the brightness it once had. But the princess remains serious, and says she didn't even notice that. Then the commander asks what she thinks of the first princess. Well, my sister is very talented and dedicated, and she is worthy of the crown. The commander doesn't believe it, and asks if she's being serious. Then the princess reprimands her, saying there may be eyes and ears everywhere and she shouldn't question Her Highness. What she basically meant was, watch your words, pal. And she leaves, making the commander embarrassed. Princess Aaliyah cared about the kingdom, and the commander knew that. It had already been 2 weeks since he had been summoned to this world, and the other heroes had improved a lot. Rito had become much more powerful with the swords, and managed to step into the path of the swordsman. Tamaki had learned to fight with staffs, but not using magic in the traditional way. She went around whacking everything, and apparently Olwe preferred to follow the path of the archers. And since her aim was good, she could focus between the barriers. Meanwhile, our protagonist was a complete useless guy. In short, the other heroes became extremely powerful, and even gained the kingdom's trust, thus making the team balanced, each one covering the other's needs. And meanwhile, our guy had only started combat training 3 days ago, and they had him throw weapons, and also learn to act silently, to disarm traps. It was as if they were turning him into a scout, since his techniques were good for that. Little did they know our protagonist was overpowered at night. The guy was completely mastering his magic, and in his free time he could also train special abilities. He was already moving objects with impressive speed and precision. What harmed him was that he couldn't use his abilities nor learn new ones because of the sun's curse, but his ability to appear in the shadows had leveled up, and with that he began hunting some monsters. He was lurking after that rare bird. Then he moved very quickly inside his shadow, and thus managed to capture the creature. Since he had gotten stronger, this was quite easy to do. He had created threads of dark mana with his weapon crafting skill, and that was useful to trap monsters. The guy was a strategist on top of everything. Right after, he used the hypnosis technique, trying to make this monster become hypnotized, and it had worked. The guy smiles, and right after tries to touch the creature. It had been completely dominated. He couldn't control creatures using his dark magic, so he did it through hypnosis, and as soon as the creature lost its life, he could control it however he wanted. He hid the bird inside his shadows, and all recent experiments had been a success. He could hide inside the shadows without being seen, and when he took creatures in there, he could drain their mana and become stronger. Later, he comes out from inside a tree, and notices a poor monster sleeping peacefully. That one didn't seem to be an aggressive monster, but at the same time, he shouldn't be too picky about the monsters he fought. After defeating a few more creatures, he returned to the palace. He lay down on the bed, but could only sleep for a few more minutes, and this had been his routine for these 2 weeks. The maid showed up, waking our hero. He had made a deal with himself not to hypnotize the maid, unless it was really necessary. However, in the past 2 weeks, he had hypnotized her to find out the history of this kingdom. This power is really awesome. Imagine how many possibilities there are just from being able to hypnotize people. He discovered that the queen took a long time to be able to have children, and this was a serious problem, since the kingdom revolved around the queen's bloodline, and she had no heir to her crown. And to make matters worse, the royal family seemed to have a curse where all babies lost their lives due to some illness. So they allowed the bloodline to come through a concubine who had a daughter with the king. And this little girl who was born was Aaliyah. Her name meant successor to the crown. And as she grew up, she became a dedicated princess, and the people loved her. But when she turned 7, the king together with the queen finally had a daughter, and they named her Amanda. This name meant the one who is loved. And that's exactly what happened. She began to be greatly loved by the queen, and they were happy because they had managed to have a daughter who inherited her magical power. And amid all this, Aaliyah was removed from her succession classes to the throne. And when Amanda turned 7, she assumed the role of first crown princess, thus leaving the other aside. The people celebrated the rise of the new princess, and meanwhile Aaliyah's name lost its true meaning, and more she was excluded and left aside, until she became abandoned by her own mother and rejected by the nobles. And so she was forced to live a life of solitude, like a doll on the shelf. So that's why she's like that. And it seems like she's always giving a fake smile. The poor girl was still responsible for keeping her role, even while being rejected. I bet you didn't expect that. She goes to our era and asks him to wake up, and she's very polite. She knows the classes can be boring, but it was very important for him to know all this information. She even says that he has been learning stealth techniques, and she mentioned that, even though he has no talent for magic, it was very good for him to learn everything in the practical training. He couldn't use the magic of this world, and those techniques he learned were the ones he had acquired on those journeys. That was strange because even commoners know how to use basic magic. The commander was very busy and wouldn't have time to teach him if she hadn't seen potential in him. But Inori thinks the commander just wants to make him a pawn for the other heroes. However, the princess slaps her hand on the table, and she said she believed in his potential to become stronger, but he needed to give his best. They get way too close, and she steps back, telling him to follow her. They start going down the palace stairs, and the guy thinks that's strange, and so they arrive at a very large and bright door. She says they will continue the training in this room. Despite being a hero, everyone called him a failure, and in a serious tone she asks if he doesn't feel ashamed of that. If it were me, I would have already told everyone I was a vampire, and had many powers I got from another world, but our guy just asks what bit her today, since she was acting in such a strange way. The second princess has hidden her emotions ever since what happened in the past. She disguised herself so well that she earned the nickname Doll Princess, but now she was another person. She was no longer that quiet second princess, keeping to herself. The girl was acting in a different way. She walks to the end of the room, and said that if he kept going like this he would be expelled from the castle. Inori wasn't understanding anything. The queen had said they had no obligation to support incompetent failures. Look at these freeloaders. Our hero didn't even ask to be there. In response, he said that his detection power was not useless. The girl agreed with that, but he wasn't dedicating himself as much as the others. And since he was a bearer of the blessing, he should dedicate himself to the maximum. He keeps listening to this, and remembers that he slept during her classes, since he was tired from training the entire night. But since she didn't know that, she assumed he wasn't dedicating himself. But thanks to that nighttime training, he had developed many skills. So he told her that he was trying to do his best, but since he wasn't doing as well as the other heroes, it seemed like he wasn't dedicated. The girl said that this room had a magic barrier, that's why no one could hear his screams from outside, and she was already approaching from behind him, with a dark expression. She was angry, because it seemed like he was making fun of her, and so she prepares to kick him in the back. The guy ends up getting hit squarely, and hits his face on the door. He turns back, asking what she was doing. You have many advantages and privileges, and yet you refuse to improve. If they expel you from here, the creatures out there would devour you right away. The guy realized that the princess from before had changed. Now she was quite imposing, and he knew she was doing this to motivate him. You just need the will to get stronger. Take the reins of your life. He gives a chuckle, and starts laughing like a madman, leaving her startled. He said she was quite a woman, making the girl's cheeks turn red, and he also said he had judged her wrong, and didn't imagine she was so strong. A little embarrassed, she asked if he was mocking her. Then he told her not to worry, because he was the person who most wanted to protect himself, just like her, and that leaves the girl surprised. And she even said she had underestimated him. Then she decides to release her power. He thanks her for being honest with him, and since he was about to be kicked out, he would need to come up with a plan, because he didn't want to be expelled. He tells her that he spent a lot of time training, but he couldn't show his strength. They said there would be training in the dungeon, and he would take advantage of the darkness to show his real potential. But that dungeon training never came. So he decided he would talk to the commander, hoping to convince her of his value. The commander called him to talk alone, and said it wouldn't be easy to convince the queen. So you're saying my ability is useless and I'm disposable? He was working hard in training, and wanted to show that he wasn't trash. However, the commander said that, on the contrary, his ability was precious. In fact, she wanted him to join the Order of Knights. The guy didn't expect that. He was trying to appear weak, but it seemed that it hadn't worked, guys, because they saw the value of his detection ability. They said this ability was very valuable in several situations, such as facing dungeons, so nothing he said to refuse would work. However, he could choose to work for the good of the kingdom as a soldier, and not as a useless person in the group of heroes. If he did that, the kingdom wouldn't see him as trash, and he wouldn't be exiled. Commander Adriana asked if he had ever considered joining the group of knights. Of course, he hadn't thought about it, because joining the group meant being tied to this country, but that was a bit complicated for him. Thank you very much for the generous offer, but I still haven't decided. She stood up and said that, when he had no place left to stay, he should come back and look for her. So you're saying that I'm in exile? That was basically what she meant, looking out the window. And Leandro Brazon from the kingdom. She said maybe yes. A few days later, he went to the library. A neighboring country had arrived for a visit, and the second princess said that the next day there would be a welcome party. Therefore, there would be no private lessons. And giving a fake smile, she said that he didn't need to attend that party. Finally, I'll take this time to rest. And so the neighboring kingdom ended up arriving. They were very well received. From above, Enro kept saying that this country was going through hard times. And even so, they kept spending the people's money on extravagant events. It was even good not to have to attend that party, so he wouldn't have to explain that he was a chosen hero. An investigation team could be sent, and that would complicate his life. So it was better to rest. Getting out of bed, he said he wasn't that excited to watch people party. However, he decided to use his eye and began wandering through the castle's corridors until he reached the place where the event was happening. He observed the two princesses, and even commented that they were very well dressed up. The second princess had that smile, looking like a doll, and even with the kingdom being broke and out of money, they still spent on very superfluous things. And he even said that the people of this world had no hope. He remembered that he had asked the maid Nala about it, and she said that these extravagant kingdom parties were putting the country in a financial crisis. They were blowing a lot of money, and that was because the queen was obsessed with showing the other countries the power of her kingdom. She didn't listen to the king's advice, and while he was spying with his eye, he noticed something strange. There was a blonde guy next to Rutu, and he was looking for Inori. There were other heroes who had also been invited, and that one, who looked like an emo, was quite gloomy, and Inori even said he would make a good friend for him. However, that blondie caught his attention. Although he had blonde hair, he looked very Japanese, and he was pointing his finger in Rutu's face, saying something. Although our hero had the detection ability, he couldn't read lips, so he began to focus a little more, and he noticed that he was shouting, "Bring Takafura from Inori here immediately, I'm challenging him to a duel." And so the second princess ended up taking him to our hero. Inori's companions found that a bit strange, and even the other heroes were suspicious about it. After that party, he ended up going there, and the blondie said he was challenging him to a duel. Oh my god, I have to go through this embarrassment here. While the other companions didn't understand anything, the emo boy and his friend were embarrassed. Why is it a duel? I don't understand. I'll prove to that goddess that you're not worthy. A goddess? I don't know what you're talking about. Stop pretending you don't know. You went there too, didn't you? To that blank space? He had also been summoned by that goddess, and when he saw her, he fell in love. Then he asked if Inori had also met her. Alright, but what does that have to do with the duel? This blonde hero had proposed marriage to that goddess, and got all emotional. However, she would only agree to marry him if by chance he defeated Inori, and so our hero understood the reason why he was looking for a challenge. That goddess was really very problematic, and he even thought there that, when he met her again, he would make sure to give her a proper revenge. However, the other heroes who had been summoned didn't know anything about this blank space. Even the heroes from the other kingdom kept asking who this goddess was. Ah, I see. So it seems that only me and this guy were summoned by that woman. Well, for now, I'll pretend I don't know anything. Alright, kid. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but I accept your duel. The blondie started laughing, saying he was very happy to know that. However, I will propose the rules for this duel and you will have to accept. My blessing doesn't have combat abilities, quite the opposite. I have no physical abilities at all, and if we fight in a direct confrontation, it would be very unfair. And raising his arms, he played an emotional game, saying it would be very inappropriate to go for such a confrontation. That's why the blonde boy starts screaming, saying that he accepts any kind of confrontation. The people are already in shock, imagining that he is putting himself in a trap, but Inori said that there was a dungeon near the capital that was used for training. Whoever defeats the first floor boss wins. Alright, I accept your conditions. Inori, are you sure about this? Your recognition ability is very good, but you are weak. Smiling, Inori said that he had a plan, and the blondie leaves all smug, saying that tomorrow will be the final challenge. The queen found out about this, and at the end of that day, our hero arrives before her. She asks what that mediocre performance inside the dungeon was. In fact, our hero had lost, because the blondie was very powerful. He managed to defeat the first floor boss very quickly, and it became clear to everyone that Inori was a complete useless. But meanwhile, he was using his detection ability to find valuable items. His focus was not to defeat the dungeon boss. So to everyone, it was clear that he had lost to his rival. The queen started yelling, saying that they would not tolerate lazy and incompetent people. The commander was there, listening to all this humiliation. They said they would not keep Inori since he was good for nothing. The second princess was sad, since he was a good friend to her, and now the queen was exiling him from her kingdom. However, our big guy gave her a cheeky smile. She started saying that he had caused damage to the country, since he brought shame. Even the first princess was there, watching everything, and no one went against the queen's wishes. She even asked if Inori had any objection. He said yes, leaving the queen startled. You said that I caused damage to this country. What damage are you referring to? Well, didn't you lose the duel? Yes, I lost the duel, exactly. But what was at stake in that duel was not defeating a monster. The queen asks what he means by that. He explains that the duel was to decide who would marry a certain woman. Besides, this duel had one condition. No one could spread information to strangers. That's why no one from outside this kingdom would know that he was a hero. And that's why he did not bring any shame at all. Thus, he had not tarnished the queen's nor the kingdom's reputation. The reputation of the kingdom of the sun in Sente was not violated. The queen kept listening to him say all these words, and meanwhile he was in the dungeon collecting the items. The soldiers arrived carrying the sacks. The princess was a little surprised. She did not expect this, and he asked the soldiers to show what is inside the sacks, and there was a lot of treasure. He had gathered all this during his raid in the dungeon, and of course the queen was surprised. She did not expect this. This gold I found on the first floor of the dungeon, and I knew this was much more useful than having defeated a hero. With a coin in her hand, the queen smiles, and he got this thanks to his detection blessing. In fact, he had used that duel only to prove his worth. Then she was surprised by this, and Inori managed to convince everyone that he was not a complete useless. Later he returns to the forest, and the matter of being exiled had been resolved. He was getting stronger, but his power could only be used at night, and because he had trained a lot, he was getting hungry. However, he noticed something. It seemed that the forest was moving. It was not only the trees, it was the whole place, and he even imagined that it was his detection power that was not working properly. So he used the revealed illusion, and with that, he managed to realize what was happening. In fact, there was a barrier that was blocking that area and creating illusions. It seems that with this power he gained an ability to see true illusions, and inside there were some animals. That's why he decided to investigate what was inside before the sun rose, and those creatures realized there was an intruder in their area. It was a gigantic fair, and upon entering there, he was not suspecting anything. But at that moment, he heard a noise. It was a pack of wolves coming in his direction. Wolves, 500 in this region. This is the first time I've seen this. He uses his mana threads. This technique was called Death Web, and after the battle, he ends up getting hurt. And he even comments that these creatures are very powerful. Moreover, they attacked in groups. And with an evil smile, he said he would drink some mana, and he ends up doing this to gain more levels. However, the atmosphere was getting a little tense, and he starts looking at the moon. Using his video game experience, he knew that the villain would appear, and he even asks, "Where is the final boss?" And while giving a somewhat arrogant laugh, the monster appears. He needs to jump back to dodge, but the wolf was so fast that it ripped his arm off. And certainly our protagonist was not expecting that, and the wolf starts attacking him again at absurd speed. With the blow, he is thrown to the ground. He is dragged until he hits a tree. What's going on? I wasn't expecting this. It was a beastly ghost of the wolf type, and its name was Fenrir. Being a beast phantasmagoric type creature, he didn't know what kind of powers it would use, and moreover, his arm had been torn off. It was not a mid-level boss, so he even thinks he could escape using his shadows. However, the creature could be agile, and while thinking about this, it charges again. At the last moment, he manages to dodge, and Fenrir ends up biting only the tree. Inori used his vampire wings to fly far away. All this was thanks to that summoning world, where the elf commented that the girl was very powerful. These powers he gained in another world, and he even comments that he is a twisted guy. It seems that Fenrir was not used to seeing vampires in this area, and Inori realizes that the wolf had spoken to him. "Do you want to know why I came here? Well, I could say that I got lost." "You got lost? Don't make me laugh with your lies." "Well, actually, I saw that it was an illusion barrier, so I got curious to know what was in here." Upon learning that the boy was an intruder, Fenrir said he would eliminate him. Moreover, our protagonist had defeated his companions, who were those smaller wolves, and while he was on top of the rock, he said that this place must be very important. He said this because Fenrir was guarding this place with great care. "Actually, we made a pact with the witch." "A witch? What do you mean?" "According to this pact, we must protect this land and eliminate any monsters that invade it. Since Midori was the intruder, he would have to be eliminated, and if you stand still, I will eliminate you in a less painful way." Midori doesn't want to risk it, so he uses his regeneration, making his arm return to normal. Only now did Fenrir realize that this boy was not just anyone, and without giving more time for idle talk, the wolf lunges at the boy. It seems that Inori was caught by surprise, and that bite ends up causing destruction. Thanks to those mythical eyes, he managed to foresee the attack. I won't even say it's a copy of the Sharingan, and using his wings, Inori flies far away. However, he can't escape for long, so he decides to slip into the trees to lose the wolf. However, Fenrir had a secret technique. He could launch several mana arrows. The arrows were made from the thread of his fur, and he begins to be hit. The attack was extremely powerful, and Fenrir could release those hairs using his magic. The boy didn't expect such a technique, and we see that Fenrir doesn't like to wait too long. He charges again for the attack, and again an explosion happens. Barely Inori managed to escape, and even thinks about trying to use his hypnosis magic. Since there is no villain with this level of magical beast, he decides to flee, and Fenrir comes right after him. Again, he uses that mana thorn technique, and the vampire wings are damaged. With a malicious smile, the wolf said he would devour him. However, that was nothing but a trap. Our hero summoned thorns from his shadows and was surrounded by these traps to protect himself. Fenrir realized he had fallen into a predicament, and even asked how this boy managed to do that. "Good thing I managed to hide these stakes inside my shadow space. The situation is still critical, but now I have a chance." This makes Fenrir even more nervous. The monster was facing those stakes. I just need to buy time to escape using the teleportation ability. But since he had managed to use hypnosis on the smaller wolves, he also wanted to try it on Fenrir. To amplify the hypnosis effect, he would need to plan a little more, so he tried to buy more time. He already draws some blades he had made with his power, and the creature waits for the right moment to attack. I just need to find an opening. Thus, he begins to emanate his dark energy. Fenrir asks what this boy is going to try this time. However, the wolf phantom was very strong, and he ends up being hit. He throws the dagger into the shadow on the ground. Right after, he directs it toward the wolf. "Haha kid, that's useless." His fur was so tough it didn't even cause injury. Again, he sends a new wave of thorns. Those strands of fur were very tough, and he begins to be hit. However, he didn't need to dodge everything. He just needed to protect his legs to be able to run, and of course also his heart, so as not to die. However, the beast was not going to let them escape, and still says he is getting irritated. However, the big guy had one more technique to try, and ends up making the black death net. He was weaving the shadow threads through all the trees, until he finally managed to trap Fenrir. The monster screams trying to escape, and it seems it had worked. But no, right guys? Easily, he managed to break free, breaking the trees. Those black magic threads were not so tough, and this hadn't even scratched the creature. My god, he broke the death net so quickly. This way, there's no choice but to use that method. Meanwhile, the wolf kept throwing those mana thorns, and he tried to run however he could. Please work, please work. He starts climbing a tree, and makes a very high jump. Fenrir keeps calling the boy an idiot, since he can't fly after his wings were damaged. From up there, the boy was an easy target. However, he uses his yellow eye, and strengthens those black mana threads. The wolf didn't expect this, but he was surrounded. Smiling, he said the wolf had fallen into the trap, and activated a new technique. This was the teleportation of the mythical eyes. The wolf doesn't understand where the boy went, and this was his plan from the start, to try to hit the wolf from behind. In a serious and practical way, Ainori said this was goodbye to the little wolf, and with those daggers in hand, he ends up striking the phantom's eye. The attack was very powerful, and Fenrir began to scream in pain. You thought you could keep running away all this time? Swinging his tail, Fenrir begins to destroy everything, and narrowly, Ainori wasn't hit. He flees to the top of a tree, and keeps saying that this wolf is in trouble. Not so much, the creature's sense of smell was still sharp and could know exactly where Ainori was. Well, it seems my attack on the creature's eyes wasn't as critical as I imagined, and Fenrir was willing to sacrifice everything to eliminate the young man. But this was the time to leave, and he disappears with a teleport, and the wolf realizes that Ainori had fled. He arrives at his room in the palace, all battered. He didn't even get to wound him so badly, but it seems he managed to take advantage. Next time, I will definitely win. The day had already dawned, and from that day he started training with the equipment. With his shadow power, he managed to infiltrate the weapons arsenal, and obtain some powerful metals. He thought Fenrir's fur might be useful, and also managed to get some. And with those wolf hairs, he began analyzing them. He had that evaluation ability, and he saw that when he put mana in the hairs, they activated, becoming hardened. It was no surprise that when attacked with magic, the wolf suffered no damage, so he used those hairs to make weapons, and created exactly those black mana threads, but now with Fenrir's hairs, and called this technique Gleipnir, saying it would have many uses, since when activated with mana, they hardened, and it would be exactly like in mythology, when Fenrir was bound with the threads of Gleipnir. Using these threads, he could make some clothes, and even made a black glove with this fabric. When adjusting the crystallization to make the right weapons, he managed to place a magic circle, and had the idea to make not only gloves. With that, he also created boots, and a really cool outfit. Now is the time for my revenge. He returns to the place where Fenrir was, and the wolf realizes the boy has returned. Hey big wolf, you thought I wouldn't come back? It's been a day, hasn't it? The wolf just keeps cursing him shameless, and asks how he dares to return to his sacred land. Trying to provoke the phantom, he said his eyes were impressive, and trying to bite him, Fenrir told him to shut up. Even without seeing the boy, the creature's attacks were precise. You invaded my lands twice. This time, I won't forgive you. The guy was angrier for the invasion of his territory than for losing his eyes. Jumping back, he says Fenrir was very resilient, but would do anything to defeat him. Even without seeing, he was tracking Ainori. Then he activates a shadow portal, and sends out his own wolves. Fenrir's 10 companions. Clearly the wolf didn't expect this, and they start attacking their own master. You can smell these wolves even without seeing them, right? They were originally your companions. This makes Fenrir lose control, because Ainori made Fenrir's own companions turn against him. But still, Fenrir attacked his old friends. Ainori thought he wouldn't do that, and had to dodge a wild attack. The fur-made clothes were quite resistant, and managed to block that attack. However, he took another blow to the belly, and the third attack in sequence he blocked with his arms. Those wolves were made of zombies. Actually a mix between zombie and vampire. If he managed to defeat Fenrir, he would become even stronger. But the big wolf wouldn't make it that easy. Realizing he was about to be hit, Ainori uses teleportation, and ends up escaping from there. You're a coward, always running. Come back here. Our big guy flew up high, placing paws firmly on the ground. Fenrir jumps. You said I'm running away, but it's the opposite. I'm attracting you. After saying that, Fenrir ends up trapped. He fell into a trap like the previous one, and we see that Ainori was quite the strategist. These threads were woven with your own fur, so you won't escape. The poor wolf starts screaming desperately. Then our hero uses the Gleipnir technique, and begins tightening the threads. All those cords hold the wolf to the ground, and he is immobilized. He screams, saying he won't be defeated, and landing on the ground, Ainori says it's too late now. He says Fenrir kept insulting him during the fight, which made him angry, and reveals the strategy of purposely taking many hits was to lure the wolf into the trap, until finally, he had no way out. Now it's time for you to say goodbye. He pulled the Gleipnir threads hard, and the wolves watched their master being defeated. It seems the wolves still had some consciousness, and now the pact with the witch between the wolf was finished. He couldn't fulfill his task. After defeating Fenrir, our hero sucked all the mana. With that, he gained 5 levels and acquired skills during the battle. But he was trying to understand what it meant. He gained a unique skill called Vassal of the King. Hey master, wait, are you talking? He imagines the wolves are able to speak because of Vassal of the King, this skill he gained. So he asks what the wolves want. They said Fenrir was their old master, and had fought for many years to protect this land. They wanted Ainori to turn them into servants as they are now. Certainly that would be very useful. Thinking it over, he decides to do that. Sometime later, he was having lunch with the other heroes. Ryuto said the first and second princess seemed very distant. Another girl said it was because the second princess was very reserved. Ryu wasn't sure about that. It seemed they really didn't like each other. While they discussed that, our protagonist couldn't eat the meat because it was seasoned with garlic. Anyway, Ryuto wanted to help the princesses become better friends and suggested that Ainori could help. Our hero just causes trouble, but he suggested that Tamaki and Oi talk to the princesses since they were girls. But Ryuto said the two weren't very close to the second princess, so he would be the most suitable person. Only the first princess was very stuck up and didn't even talk to him. But Ryuto had a surprise. What surprise are you talking about? Well, actually, it's because the first princess likes me. So if I ask her to talk to you, she will accept. That made the other girls a little discouraged, finding the conversation quite awkward. Since this could be a great way for our protagonist to gain more experience, he accepted the deal. So he went to the first princess's room. You can come in. I'm only going to agree to talk to you because Ryuto asked me. Wow, what a reception right away, huh? When he entered the place, he noticed there were many valuable items, and even thought she had no taste for decoration. Unlike the other rooms, this one was quite luxurious. The mother asked if by chance Ainori was fascinated by those expensive objects. Pointing to a sculpture, he asked if that was to her taste. No, those are gifts my father and mother received. And without further delay, he said he came to talk about her relationship with her sister. What do you want to say? As if it were something I should worry about, right? At that moment, he realized it would be harder than he expected. Well, actually, I was asked to help you two reconcile. In an arrogant way, the girl said she didn't want to solve that matter. Why don't you want to be friends with your sister? Turning sideways, she replied that it was none of his business, since he was a commoner. Putting his hand on his face, he realized this wouldn't lead anywhere. Ah, okay, then I'll tell Ryuto you didn't want to, and he'll be very upset. Hearing that, she blushed. Since she didn't want to, she would leave Rito thinking something negative about her. Wait, I'm going to explain to you, you're too hasty. Then she begins to tell that things were not always like this between them. The caddy sits down to hear this story. When they were younger, they got along very well. She treated the other as if she were really a little sister. At that time, they even played like true sisters who loved each other, and even followed each other everywhere. But at some point, she began to distance herself from little Amanda. Gradually, she excluded herself. When she turned 7, she had become the princess with the right to inherit the throne. It was only then that she discovered that Alila was not a half-sister. She admits that this was a little shocking for her. From that moment, the relationship between the two broke. Over time, she had more rigorous training for the throne succession, and realized one thing, that the second princess was not just a sister, but an exceptionally kind person. She even thought how wonderful it was to have that girl by her side. However, the adults began to scold her to stay further away. That's why today they aren't that close. Ainori realized that deep down Amanda really wanted to be friends with her sister. Since this room only had gift decorations, he realized Amanda let herself be influenced by what others said and did. Everything she had was provided by other people, even her personality. Because of the noble's influence, Amanda ended up becoming a very arrogant person. With tear-stained cheeks, she asks Ainori for advice, saying she will listen. Well, it seems her pride is just part of her nature. A piece of advice I give you is to start calling a Flaminer man. Do you think that suits you? That left her a little confused. She said the nobles and the maids would gossip about her. Ah, so the nobles and the maids have higher status than the princess herself? You must act as you want. If that will make you happier, do it. But know that this might cause problems for Minor Man. Know that a Flaminer is not as weak as you think. That made her thoughtful. With red cheeks, she said she would think about it. Ainori thanks her and leaves. Soon after, he talks to the maid. He says the first princess wants to restore a good relationship with a Flaminer. The maid goes there to deliver the news. The next day, the atmosphere in the castle was different. Nala brought a message from the second princess. Ainori hadn't even fully woken up and asked what kind of message that was. Actually, in the morning there will be a special class, very different from the ones they had. Oh my god, I have a bad feeling about this. We see that this class is actually a visit to the city. He walks through the capital streets, under that scorching sun. He asks what kind of class that is. Arla says it's important for Ainori to get used to the city people. Besides, he's accompanying a noblewoman to shop. What? Going to buy something? In this heat? She said yes. She starts looking at some accessories. Ainori knows she is choosing a gift to give to her little sister. She was even focused, as if this were an ultra-important mission. Hey, Ainori, help me choose. Which one do you think is prettier? I don't know. Both are pretty. I don't understand much about that. It seems she was undecided about which to choose. The protagonist wonders why she is acting like that. Nala explains that this week will be the first princess's birthday. That's why Isla wanted to give a special gift. When Nala gave the news that Amanda wanted to reconcile, Isla was very happy. She said she would go out immediately to buy a present for her little sister. I see. But why are you asking for my opinion? Isla said that because he had talked to her sister yesterday, he should know something she liked. But thinking about it, in her room there were only very ugly presents. So she said that anything Isla gave her sister, she would like. Turning to him, she asked if he was trying to say that giving a gift would be useless. Not exactly. Actually, the important thing is not the gift, but who is giving it. Just knowing that Isla cared enough to give a gift, Amanda would surely be happy. The maid smiled, saying Inori was very kind. Thus Isla understood everything, and ended up buying an item. If he hadn't proposed to reaffirm the friendship, Isla wouldn't have thought about giving a gift. And now she was there, all happy, trying to reconcile with her younger sister. Nala even started laughing, very happy, saying she liked to see the princess happy. The second princess appeared and asked what they were talking about, making the maid very embarrassed, trying to hide it. So they paid and left. 5 days passed, and they were at the birthday party. After having given much treasure to the queen, he was invited to the party. The meals were very extravagant, since only noble and rich people were gathered. He saw exactly the moment when Isla gave a gift to her little sister. It was a very pretty hair clip. Amanda turned around asking how it looked. Isla said it looked very good on her, since the girl was very beautiful. That made little Amanda happy. She thanked in front of everyone. The heroes applauded, and the nobles were pleased. And our hero used his power, because he knew something strange was happening. The scene shifts to a little before. At the start of the party, he noticed Ayla was very embarrassed, not wanting to go there to deliver the gift. She seemed so nervous that he even commented that she looked like a country girl. That's because Amanda was talking with Remuto, a hero. Well, maybe he should interfere to give a little help. He went there, and the second princess asked what she should do. She remembered he had kicked her a few days ago, so he did the same, pushing her away. Our guy pushed the girl into the middle of the hall. She faced her little sister. The nobles were surprised. They didn't expect that, and Inori whistled, trying to hide it. Amanda was embarrassed, with blushing cheeks. What she really needed was a little push, literally. She was hiding the gift behind her hands. My God, my daughters, you are sisters. Stop that. He still thought she should deliver the gift right away. She took a deep breath, and giving the gift said, "Happy birthday. Today I brought a present for the first princess. Here is the present I bought for you." Amanda didn't know how to react. When she opened the little box, she was surprised. She said out loud that she wanted to use that gift right away. Ayla was also surprised. She didn't know her sister would like it so much. She started asking Ayla to put it on her. The scene returns to the gift. At the moment she was putting the clips in her sister's hair, she asked if it looked nice, and Ayla said yes. She also said she would like to give a gift to her sister. It was a little hard to say that. Well, actually, I will call you big sister. Is that okay with you? Surely Ayla didn't expect that. She remembered the good moments they had together when they were younger. With teary eyes, she said she was very happy, and that she could indeed be called big sister. Amanda asked why her sister was crying. In silence, she hugged her. The two were very emotional. Well, I think the problem between you two is now solved. Even the king and queen were crying, saying that scene was very moving. Ryoto appeared and said that was thanks to our hero. Well, now that I worked hard and got this alone, I deserve a reward. The other hero said he would think about it. Everyone was happy, since the two princesses had reconciled. It seemed like everything was working out and they were all happy. Ayanori laughing said that Ryoto and the other hero were very conceited and thought they were the protagonists. So he decided to go out for some fresh air. At that moment, Ayla also appeared, wanting to talk to him. The girl thanked him, saying that was thanks to him. Ah, no problem, I just did what was necessary. He still asked if she wanted to say something else, since they were alone. He knew that because he used the blessing of detection. What did you think about expressing your emotions? Isn't it nice? While she was about to answer, they heard a noise from inside. People were shouting. Ayanori said that now Aylal would no longer be called the doll princess. However, an attack was happening inside the banquet hall, and Aylal was frightened. They decided to go inside to see what was happening. However, Ayanori asked to wait, since it could be dangerous. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The queen had lost her mind. There was a blonde man next to the king. He shouted, asking silence from all the corrupt. Thanks to the royal family's wastefulness, the country is becoming poor. The queen kept wasting finances on extravagant events, and the king did nothing to stop her. Betray with royal blood would take the throne, and Egiana, the former commander, would be the queen. What was happening was a coup d'etat. Amanda ran to her mother and knelt. She began saying that Betray was crazy. She was preparing to use magic to avenge her mother. However, that would be very risky. She would be putting her life at stake. So the commander decided to intervene. With a single attack, she stopped the coup. She noticed that the little sister had also just lost an arm. She was wounded and crying a lot. The hair clip fell to the ground, and all the heroes began shouting Amanda's name. Don't move, Rito. If you attack, you will also die. The man who called himself the new king said he was a member of the witch religion. He said the former queen had betrayed the witch's will by deciding to summon heroes, and that this was a grave sin that could only be forgiven by death. Amanda began crying a lot. Without mercy, the commander ended up finishing the girl. She did it saying it was for the good of the nation. Azwarnal started screaming desperately, because she saw before her eyes the death of her entire family. Inori knew he couldn't stop them because it was still daytime, but at the same time he needed to protect Azwarnal. Otherwise she would have the same tragic end. So he put his hand over the girl's mouth, telling her to be silent. What was happening was a rebellion. They took advantage of this extravagant event to stage the coup. The man shouted loudly, calling his compatriots to gather the people on the witch's side. For me, all the nobles who were spending the people's money. Thus the knights began a mass elimination, defeating all the nobles who were present. Embezzlement, bribes, waste, and discrimination. These people corrupted the country along with the royal family, and should pay for it with death. The guy laughed evilly while the members were defeated. Inori kept holding Azwarna, telling her to be quiet. If you make noise, we will also die. You have two choices, die a worthless death here, or escape and survive. The poor girl was witnessing all of this, folks. Ailoto was facing the girl he liked, Amanda. He said all this rebellion was ridiculous, because there is no one who deserves to die. The self-proclaimed king said the hero was too young to understand things. All the nobles here are nothing but unworthy to live. You have no idea of the situation this country is in. But even so, there was no need to kill them, said Yahello. The guy did not agree with that. He saw up close the horrors the country was facing, and asked Ijana to arrest the heroes. Pointing the gun, she asked Yahello to give up fighting Bentley. The guy knew he was no match to defeat the commander, who was the most powerful woman in the world, so he wouldn't let it go and already launched his magic at the girl. It was his sword of light and caused a big explosion, but it didn't scratch the commander at all, because she managed to block it with her sword. Your strike is decent, but not enough to hurt me. The guy tried again, but was blocked by the sword. It was so powerful that Yahello couldn't even hit her. With the swinging of her swords, she destroyed the entire place. Yahello started shouting, calling for Yahello right in front. To avoid being hit by the soldier, she made a protective barrier. Thomas said they should first save Yahello, but they weren't even managing to save themselves. The commander was watching that whole critical situation, and Yahello was already very tired from the battle. She told Thomas she was already facing many difficulties, so it was better for Yahello to give up soon, but he wasn't going to surrender, and began blocking her attacks. Logically, she wasn't using her full strength. What do you think you're doing? Even if you fight with your full power, you will never defeat me. Just give up, be captured, and stay alive. The poor Ella was crying a lot. Just now that she had made friends again with her sister, Yahello just watched without much to say. Even without wanting to ruin the mood, he said that if they stayed there, they would die, so they needed to escape. Decide quickly, Ella. Do you want to run and survive, or stay here and die once and for all? But then you won't be able to continue your family's legacy. She thought about it a little and shouted that she wouldn't give up. She would live for the sake of her dear little sister. She wouldn't let anyone decide whether they had the right to live or not. Our hero just watched and said he would help her escape. Second princess, or better, Ella, let's get out of here together. Meanwhile, Ryuto kept fighting the commander, but Egiana was extremely powerful. With simple strikes, she broke Ryuto's sword of light, said that was his end, and stabbed the boy, throwing him into the air. For a moment, he lost consciousness. Tamaki realized that Ryuto had been defeated. She shouted for the boy, and if things continued like that, he would lose his life. With a simple attack, Egiana also broke Ryu's barrier. The girls realized they were already defeated. There was nothing more to do. The commander shouted for the soldiers to arrest the girls, and they went there. They were thrown to the ground and began screaming desperately at what the commander was doing. Ryuto was unconscious, and she ordered another soldier to take the boy to prison too. She realized the heroes had gotten stronger, and had still dedicated much time training Ryuto. Meanwhile, Ulwi was managing to escape. It was not easy to escape in high heels. Besides that, the castle was completely surrounded. Our hero was a complete useless one. Still in the morning, he warned that soldiers were coming down the left corridor, and she should prepare. So they moved, making a little noise so the soldiers wouldn't hear. Inori's detection ability was very useful in occasions like this. Ulwi, you can use magic, right? She said she could only use basic magic. He grabbed her arm and said that just ahead there were 3 soldiers who would appear at the corner in 10 seconds. She should do something to immobilize them. Ulwi became desperate, because she was not that good at attack magic. However, there were only a few seconds left. She took a deep breath and started preparing an attack spell. Only 3 seconds remaining. When the soldiers were almost appearing, she used the magic called air hole. Without the soldiers being able to defend themselves, they were hit. And because they had no air to breathe, they fainted. The path was now clear. Inori even commented that Oi was very talented, since she defeated 3 soldiers at once. I only managed to hit them because I knew they would appear. And are you okay? You seem kind of tired. Actually, using the detection magic during the day was a bit tiring. Holding I pulled his arms, he began pulling her through the corridors by the safest path. He knew he needed to buy time, because he would only be able to protect her when it really got dark. And he knew that if they met the captain, they would be screwed, so he had to make sure they wouldn't run into her. They ended up reaching a place. They realized it was safe because there were no soldiers. Aoi, I already imagine why there is no one here. It was the servants' quarters and was all dirty. They were shocked when they opened the doors. All the palace servants had been eliminated. The guards spared no one, not even the servants who had no problem with the government's waste. Aoi realized that Nala, her personal maid, was also there. She ran there crying over her friend's death. Nala had been killed without a hint of mercy. Aoi hugged her friend's body and started crying a lot. Even Inori felt a bit hurt by that. He remembered Nala smiling, very happy to be helping buy that present. He realized this fantasy world was not as beautiful as he imagined. Awai was finishing saying goodbye to her friend who thanked Inori and waited for him. He said he took advantage of those moments to look for a safer path to escape the palace. Meanwhile, the heroes were imprisoned in the dungeon. That cell had a protection magic so they couldn't escape. Aegiana asked everyone to be quiet and not try anything stupid. Someone asked why they were handcuffed if they couldn't even leave there. Ryuto told them to stay calm and wait, because the heroes were very valuable in this world. So probably this witches group was keeping them alive as hostages. That was exactly what the commander agreed with. She said that for someone as tense as him, he was even managing to stay calm. But it was clear Ryuto was really very angry. Even the girls got scared of him. Looking at those eyes, Aegiana said she recognized that color. She remembered a moment in the past, when she was all injured. She saw a baby lying among those bodies. It was the look of someone overwhelmed by their own helplessness. She had that same look in the past. She knew very well how Ryuto felt. The guy swore revenge. You're still very young, Ryuto. If you want to survive in this world, never forget this feeling of yours. Keep your judgments cold. If only you had these same feelings before, maybe you could have saved your companions. After these harsh words, Asiana left. The girls lost all hope. While she was leaving, the guy said he would definitely get revenge. Some soldiers told the commander that the princess was not found. She ordered the search for the second princess to be doubled. Everyone should give their maximum effort. Meanwhile, Oi was saying where the secret passages were. Only the royal family knew about these passages. There was a secret door leading to the underground canals. If they went through there, they should be able to escape outside the Zala castle. It was risky, but it was the only alternative. It's worth trying, but is that the only path the royal family knows? Oi said yes, it was an emergency escape route. Since they had no other option, they decided to go through there. When saying goodbye to her friend, she apologized for being helpless and thanked the maid for everything she had done until today. At that moment, soldiers were in the corridors looking for her. Since the secret passage was known only by the royal family, it really was the only hope they had to escape safely. Besides that, Inori would need to buy time until nightfall, so they started running to the secret passage at the end of the castle. But the number of soldiers was increasing more and more. Inori, using his detection ability, knew the soldiers were getting closer. Holding Oi's arm, he said, "We can't go that way. It's an ambush." It wasn't 10 or 20 soldiers, it was many more. They know we're still in the castle and are looking for us. The sound of soldiers' footsteps began to appear at the end of the corridor. Desperate, Oi asked if there was any way to escape without being seen. Since they were surrounded, he said it was impossible. It seemed the commander knew about the secret passage and placed some soldiers to block the way. He was already thinking there was no way to escape anymore. Being realistic, he said it wouldn't be easy. If it were just me, I'd find a way. But since I'm with this girl, it's going to be a little harder. Screaming, she said she wouldn't give up. She refused to stand still and let herself be killed by the rebels. She would fight to the end. Saying these words, she got embarrassed. Inori didn't expect her to be that strong. He began smiling, saying she was someone he could trust. I used my detection ability and found out a neighboring kingdom is coming with military forces to the castle. What is an army? Yes, exactly. When will they arrive? Probably within a few minutes. Judging by the sun, I'd say in about 15 minutes they will be here. That gave new hope to the girl, but gaining 15 minutes was a bit risky. Too much time, so he holds her hand and starts running to a safer place. The soldiers heard some noise. They realized it was exactly the two of them passing by there. A soldier shouted to launch fire arrows, and they started shooting. Albio even put up a protective barrier. She managed to block the first arrows. However, 15 minutes was a long time. The arrows started breaking the barrier, and she was hit. She told Inori she wouldn't hold out much longer, and the distracted girl told them to turn right. By doing so, they managed to escape some arrows. But the explosions of the fire arrows were very powerful. The soldier shouted he wouldn't let them escape. The only thing our hero could think was that he needed to gain 10 more minutes. The soldiers were coming from the left, and they would be trapped again. Inori told Inori to attack now. She did, but now put up a protective barrier. The soldiers asked what the hell that was. Simply, they managed to break the barrier. Inori started to get worried, thinking he wouldn't last much longer. Besides that, Inori was already very tired. The sun was almost setting, only 5 minutes left. However, they were trapped at the end of a corridor. It was a dead end. Sorry, Oe, but I couldn't find another way. We're surrounded. Only 3 minutes were left when the soldiers reached them. They fired countless arrows. She tried to put up the barrier, but there were too many attacks. The soldiers shouted not to stop shooting. They aimed again and fired the arrows. The barrier was already broken. She used the last bit of mana to protect her and her companions' lives, but the attacks were too powerful, and a big explosion happened. The soldier ordered the next shot. OY was already exhausted. She couldn't cast the barrier spell anymore. Saying she couldn't resist, she gathered a last bit of strength. About to lose her life, she asked Inori if the soldiers from the other kingdom had already arrived. Laughing, the soldier said the girl lost her strength, and that would be the final attack. She fell to the ground and realized Inori was no longer there. She thought she was abandoned, but we see he managed to enter inside her shadow. Screaming, she asked where Inori was. She realized she was just used as a distraction. There was no kingdom coming to help them. He said that just to give her hope. In the end, he managed to escape alone. She ended up being betrayed. The soldier gave the final shout. She realized that was the end. The sun was setting, only 1 second left. When the sun finally set, our hero could transform. He did that in front of Ioi. The soldiers noticed that. Out of nowhere, the environment became dark. They asked who had put out the torches. A gigantic shadow of Fenrir appeared. My loyal servant Fenrir, take care of them. The wolf began devouring all the soldiers. He did it in a few moments. The environment became scary. The remaining soldier began trembling with fear. He didn't know what was happening. Ioi asked why Inori was so different. Giving a crazy smile, he asked where the commander was. Please, don't scream. Just tell me where Ajiana is. The guy realized he was screwed. In a few moments, Inori defeated them all. He asked Fenrir if that snack was delicious. Since the captain of the soldiers didn't want to answer, Inori said Fenrir could devour him. The big dog replied that the soldiers were very weak and didn't have a good taste. The guy fell to the ground scared, asking what that was. Our hero knew now they were begging for their lives. You killed many people, didn't you? So do you think it's fair that I show mercy to you? The guy was trembling, couldn't even answer properly. The soldier, looking at him, asked if the boy was really Takafuji Nori. Well, who knows, right? He ordered Fenrir to devour the man. Moments later, Aji was all injured. There was no way she could survive anymore. To have a little hope, she used her magic to stop the bleeding. It's good that you do that, but it won't help much. It's already too late now. Ujui asked since when he had that power. The boy asked her not to look at him like that. This power can only be used when the sun sets. That's why I needed to buy time. I made up that story about reinforcements coming to help us. If it was just for me to survive alone until I escaped, I needed to save you. That's why I gave you that little hope. He realized the shine in Ujui's eyes was fading. She was no longer the energetic girl from before. Even so, she didn't give up on life. She seemed to try to find strength to keep living. I'll be direct, Ujui. Are you still a pure girl? If so, there is a way for you to survive. But for that, you will have to become my subordinate. Do you accept to die as a human? Or do you want to live as someone who isn't human? The choice is yours. She heard those words and looked a little confused. With a very low voice, she said she would like to. She remembered her friend Nala and her sister Amanda. No matter what happens, she will have to survive, even if she has to sell her soul to a demon. He asked again and she agreed, saying she would do everything to survive. Good answer. Then he picked the girl up in his arms. He prepared to bite and turn her into a vampire. He ended up doing it. He infused his mana into her body, then covered the girl with his hood and hid her. In the following minutes, he transformed into a vampire and asked the wolves to take care of her. Now he had a mission to fulfill. All the wounds on Aoi's face began to heal. Soon after, Inori used his detection power. The new king was sitting on the throne. He received the news that the second princess was found. The man celebrated, saying this was the beginning of a just nation. He had planned this rebellion for a long time. Hunger and disease spread throughout the country, with many orphans abandoned. As a warrior, he walked the city and saw these scenes. He commented that he felt bad for not being able to do anything, but now everything would be different. He would bring a new era to those people. He spent years gathering soldiers with the same ideals. Now they would restore the country legitimately. At that moment, our hero appeared in the shadows. He managed to eliminate the proclaimed king. The soldiers saw it with their own eyes. At that moment, Egiana felt something strange, a bad premonition. She turned and said something uncomfortable was hitting her body. The king had been eliminated. I think this was the shortest king in history. That means your plan failed, and I don't think you have reason to keep fighting. The soldiers called him a bastard, saying Betray-sama was eliminated. But our hero smiled. He said they wouldn't accept the chance to stay alive. They eliminated all the nobles inside the banquet hall. Therefore, it would be unfair to give them a new chance. With his daggers, he began hitting the soldiers, eliminated them one by one. It's no use resisting. This will only make things worse. Some warriors noticed something strange was happening. They went to the Great Hall to check. They heard a loud scream. When they arrived, they didn't expect to see that scene. All the soldiers of the rebellion were defeated. If I'm not mistaken, you are the warriors under Commander Egiana's command. That was the Valkyria team. One of them asked if that was really Takafuji Nuri and what he was doing. They asked where the commander was, but they were too horrified to answer. Their legs trembled and they couldn't say a word. The shock was so big that they froze like statues, but one of them decided to attack. She managed to stab her sword into our hero's chest. He took the full blow. He even started to cry seeing that scene. It was too shocking. His companions had all been eliminated. How can you cry for someone who just eliminated a royal family? After saying that, he finished off the girl. The companions started screaming desperately. Right after he took his daggers from her body. Miranda, over there. Prepare yourselves. Those who remained would fight him. They noticed Nuri was very calm. That showed he had a frightening power. They noticed he had some demonic power, so they needed to cut off his head. Very calm, he used his evaluation power. He realized those tools were magical weapons, totally different from the ones he faced before. Something caught his attention. It was an ice magic trapping his foot. The mage was very talented. She announced she had caught him. At that moment, they launched a magic attack, causing great damage to his body. Looks like these weapons are really interesting. Besides that, they were very fast. He took another attack to the face. They didn't imagine it would be easier than they thought. However, he hadn't fallen yet. Smiling, Inor said those magical tools were problematic. He even cut his own leg to get free. Jumping back, he tried to distance himself from the girls. They didn't know how he still managed to move, so injured like that. The next attack had to be strong to eliminate him. However, they were already trapped in a Glitner thread trap. She heard her friends screaming for help. They were already trapped on the ground. I would like to enjoy this battle with you, but I'm a bit in a hurry. So Vice President, I'll give you a gift of a one-on-one fight. He walked across the scene and said this was a warm-up to face Egiana. She sighed, saying he wouldn't defeat the commander. However, Inor thought differently. These girls were skilled, and he knew the commander was much stronger, but it was a good benchmark. He still asked why this girl was attached to the group, since all would be eliminated. That made her furious. She rushed at our hero, telling him to shut up. You shouldn't judge her if you don't even know them. Those weapons were really problematic, but he managed to break them. Inside his shadow, he pulled a dagger. He hit her hand and disarmed her. You have talent, girl. Why not join me? At that moment, she remembered when she was welcomed by Egiana, the kingdom's commander. All the other warriors were very nice. As soon as she arrived, she made great friendships with them all. She even felt a little embarrassed, as she wasn't used to it. Now that her companions had been eliminated, she would avenge their deaths. You have an exemplary fighting spirit. I'd like you to join me, but she wouldn't accept that. Taking advantage of the battle, Inuri managed to analyze the warrior's strengths. Her speed was so great he was impressed. Just thinking that the commander was stronger than her gave him chills. However, she was focused on those threads. The girl's desire was to save her friends. She still said the rebel group only wanted the nation's good. They were all doing this to bring peace to the kingdom. But unexpectedly, she ended up getting bitten. Her companions also turned into vampires. she started being devoured by her own friends. It was Inuri's wolves who did that. Saying goodbye, our protagonist said the fight was fun, but now he needed to find Egiana and finish her quickly. He also said goodbye to his wolves, saying they could have fun. Poor Valkyria ended up being eliminated. I don't know about you, but our protagonist here is pretty sinister. He commented that now it was time for the final touch. In the castle courtyard, there was a very loud noise. It was the rest of the soldiers being devoured, so Egiana ran there. Inuri knew that would attract the girl, and it really was working. She went to the main hall and noticed that the proclaimed king was no longer there. At that moment, arriving at the courtyard, she noticed a head lying in the center. Looking at that face, she seemed to recognize it, even from afar. It was a blonde man. She went there and grabbed the head. It was Lord Betray, who had been executed. In a higher position, our protagonist was in vampire form. The moon is beautiful, isn't it? That is a very famous confession phrase in my world. Looking up, she asked if that really was Inuri. This head is a gift from me to you, Commander. She placed the head on the ground. Looking at those wings, she asked if by chance he had made a contract with some demon to gain those powers. He looked at his own wings and thought they looked more like vampire wings than demon wings. You came this far just to gain power and threw away your human pride. He just listened to her words. He still said he hadn't done anything. He was just living. That made Luarinya angry. She said living like that was a very weak reason, and that she in fact fought for the good of the nation. In this world, a strong reason to live is necessary. It doesn't matter if you live for your family or for the nation. What matters is that you have a great desire. She wanted to bring peace to the people. The woman said it was her fault because she wasn't a good teacher. That was why he made a contract with demons. She even apologized, saying she wasn't a good teacher. Our hero put his hand on his face, said she didn't need to keep preaching to him. With a serious look, he said she was hypocritical because she eliminated the royal family. In her defense, she said he was hypocritical because he had no right to say such things. She remembered he also killed a king. Well, Betray, but actually that guy was an imposter. At that moment, she saw something that paralyzed her. It was a wolf coming out of the wall. They brought all the soldiers who had been eliminated. She realized that Inori eliminated them all, and she was the only one alive. Even her Valkyria companions had been eliminated. Egiana thought the coup was a success, but that was not what happened. All the soldiers were eliminated. The death of the Valkyrias is your fault, Egiana. You are responsible for all of this. No soul was left alive, except you. Inor blamed her, saying she was responsible for everything that happened. However, I have a power to save them all, as long as you want to sacrifice yourself, as the prophecy says. He thought it would be safer to convince her to sacrifice herself and avoid the fight. He could use his vampire power to save their lives, so he wouldn't have to fight the commander who was very strong. He gave her time to think. Speak quickly, Egiana, whether you accept or not. If you give your life, I save all your companions. And about the other soldiers, I'll try to save them too, don't worry. However, she soon drew her sword. He asked what the hell she was doing. It seemed she didn't accept the deal. Striking the sword on the ground, she began to emanate power. She realized she was praying. It was for her companions who suffered humiliation and were eliminated. Also for the companions who were about to lose their lives. Drawing her sword, a red energy started shining strongly. Inori knew the battle would be very difficult. Let me see if I understand. In other words, you're saying you will abandon your knights, is that right? I wouldn't abandon them, I would give my life in exchange for theirs, and I would defeat you with my own hands. At that moment, he realized there would be no negotiations. If she continued with that plan, no soldier would survive, much less would she achieve the power to rule the country. But Egiana said what mattered was the people of the kingdom. Even if the nobles and corrupt were killed, that was the least of the details. She fought for the good of the nation. Releasing her power, she said that was the reason she had stayed alive all this time. He realized she was really powerful, and even smiled. He got extremely excited to be able to fight her. The commander asked why he seemed so satisfied. My daughter, this protagonist of ours is crazier than Batman already. He held back a laugh, saying he had underestimated her, and even apologized for disrespecting her. Lying or bluffing there wouldn't be appropriate, so he used his power to turn the soldiers into zombies. They came back to life. She knew he was only doing that to humiliate her. Now with his new army of zombies, he would devour her. He ordered everyone to attack. The knights charged at Egiana. Seriously, she said the name Takafuji Nori. You are beyond redemption. He already started sweating cold. Her blade started shining strongly. A crimson light illuminated the whole place. Besides not deserving her forgiveness, he was her declared enemy. He tried to escape, afraid. He began flying very high, while she spun the sword, destroying everything. He knew she was dangerous, but not that much. Holding the sword, Egiana said she wouldn't let them escape alive. All those zombies were eliminated very quickly, so he would have to use his other plan. Just looking at her face, he already knew she was serious. That look is what I was looking for. Her strength was so great there were no openings. He had summoned all his blades and wolves. Somewhat crazily, he said he would use all powers at his disposal to eliminate her. A hand approached Egiana. She realized he was setting a trap, so she released her power, destroying everything around. Inori commented that she didn't hesitate to eliminate even her own companions. Now the zombies of the Valkyrias were arriving. They were her former students. Our protagonist played very dirty. She remembers those girls when she took them in and started training them to become knights, but she doesn't hesitate and manages to eliminate them in the blink of an eye. Her power was overwhelming. Just by swinging the sword, she destroys everything. However, the wolves were getting closer. Egiana lived up to the title of the strongest woman in the world and managed to eliminate them all. She even asks if Inori will just watch from afar. If you don't come to me, I'll come to you first. first. He knew surprise attacks wouldn't work, and that hand-to-hand combat against her wasn't a good idea. He asked Alha how the commander's power worked. She said Aegiana was very strong as a simple knight, but when she became commander, she got an ancient sword. This sword became sharper when infused with magic. Inori realizes that's what was happening. The sword became sharper during the fight. He tries to attack from afar, but she blocks all the blows. His daggers are split in half. Even knives hardened with dark magic break into pieces, all because of the ancient sword Aegiana possessed. It was a sword that cut anything. No matter what he threw at it, she blocked everything. And she still used magic, hammering the air. Our hero didn't expect she could use ranged attacks. He ends up crushed against the wall, having his wings broken. Now that you can't fly, are you going to run away? He starts to fall from above. He realizes the distance between them will close, so he doesn't waste time and throws more daggers. Aegiana blocks all attacks. He uses a weapon to slide on the wall. However, she approaches and strikes a blow. Inori is very fast too and manages to dodge, but he was hit, and his arm was cut off. The guy falls behind her, says he did well because he was fighting the strongest woman in the world. Breathing deeply, he admits she has no blind spots. You're pretty agile too, Inori. Why don't you try being a Krobata? Looks like you're joking today. Using his analysis ability, he realizes the artifact is a merchal sword. In this world, that weapon is effective against demons. Out loud, she says that sword is great against him, because that way he can no longer regenerate. With an ironic smile, he says the fight will be more balanced now. He disappears into a shadow behind her. From there, he throws a dagger. She breaks the knife without even looking back. At that moment, he starts sweating cold. Realizes she really has no blind spots. The powerful daggers break like glass. Seriously, she asks what else he's planning against her. Wait a moment, let me ask you something. What do you want to know? You're very fast, you even block attacks coming from blind spots. You're surrounded by yourself in a battlefield made of a thin layer of magic. Is that it? I feel something like that when I use my detection ability. She corrects him, saying it's not an ability but a blessing. Ability, blessing, whatever, it's the same thing. She says his recognition ability isn't good for combat, but still necessary. She comments she also noticed what he was trying to hide, some mana threads. The guy laughs and asks how she noticed that. Since she found out, he decides to activate his trap. But there's no time and she cuts all the threads. That was much easier than he thought. He starts laughing in despair because not even the Gleipnir threads could hold her. Without more talk, she charges at him. However, some lightning starts striking the whole place. Who was up there was Fenrir. He was summoned to help in the battle. Good thing Fenrir appeared in time to keep distance between me and her. The girl asks if that was a familiar. She even admits it was a good strategy to keep distance between her and Inori. The commander was so impressive that she didn't even see the attack coming, yet managed to dodge. From below, she uses the R-hammer technique, manages to destroy the whole wall. Inori starts fleeing, shouting for Fenrir to keep attacking. He does a combo, attacking with daggers and with Fenrir. It was an impressive volume of attacks, all at once. Our hero's strategy was to exhaust all the magic she was storing, but he had to be realistic because she was very strong. If he kept that pace, he'd run out of mana before her. Also, she made a kind of magic layer that could detect all movements. That could be one of the reasons she was so fast. Aegiana's reaction speed was extraordinary. He is thrown far away, falls outside the detection area. Smiling, Inori says he'd have to fight her under those conditions, so he decided to leave that zone where she could predict all attacks. She kept approaching, blocking Fenrir's attacks. I imagine Inori will prepare a next attack since I'm busy defending against the wolf's attacks. But that was her trap. She used a barrier and turned to Inori to block his attack. She managed to cut his other arm, leaving him disarmed. The attack was so critical it could be the end for him, and that's exactly what she says, telling him to say his last words. With a cut from this sword, a demon can't regenerate. But Inori laughs, saying it's not over. We see that below. In the shadow, a demon is coming out. The wolf bites the girl's foot. It seems she was trapped, cornered. She was outside that magic detection circle. She hesitated whether to cut the wolf or Inori first, because our protagonist was already getting close, trying to attack her. At the last moment, she realized he had regenerated the arm. He was just pretending he wouldn't recover. With a triumphant smile, he says she fell into his trap because she was off guard. Could it be that the merchal sword didn't work? As she approaches, she emanates her red mana. She realizes he was trying to hypnotize her with a spell. You looked into my eyes, didn't you? The hypnosis magic was almost completely taking over her. If she were dominated, all would be lost. But this girl was strong and manages to cut the magical spell. Even magical formations can be cut by this magnificent blade. He jumps back because he knows she is dangerous. Next, he cuts the shadow wolf. Seriously, the commander asks if that's all he has to show, and she also asks why he was laughing. Our hero says it's because the battle is very fun. What's wrong? You're not enjoying it either? She didn't want to admit the battle was interesting. After smiling, he orders Fenrir to keep attacking. Moving the sword very fast, she manages to block all the blows. He prepares another magic circle in his hand. It was a teleport behind the girl. She notices in time that he was plotting something. When she turns, he is already behind her. Adriana was caught by surprise. He knew she could cut magical formations, so he needed to trap her arm first. And that's exactly what he does, holding the girl's arm. He prepares a bite to turn her into a vampire. Adriana realizes this is very bad. Besides, her feet were injured and she couldn't move well, but she still had the other arm free to use the sword. She puts some of her mana to sharpen the blade, prepares to cut the enemy's head. Inori thinks he's doomed, but she manages, overwhelmingly, to cut off his head. It seems Nasoroa was expecting this. He is surprised by her powerful attack. In a farewell tone, she says it was good to have trained him these weeks. Soon after, Nasarawa's head falls to the ground. This was a very difficult fight for the strongest knight in the world, but of course Fenrir wouldn't let it go easy. With a simple attack, she defeats Fenrir. The creature disappears, disintegrating like smoke. Meanwhile, Inori realizes he has lost. No matter the strength he had gained, the knight's experience was more relevant. The moon shone in the sky. After this battle, she realized all her companions had died, but now there was a new hope to bring peace to the kingdom. She had dedicated much of her life for this day to come. With her guard down, she dissolves her barrier. At that moment, she takes a blow to the arm. She didn't quite understand what was happening, but apparently, Inor's head was not his weak point. It was his heart. He was still alive and begins to attack the girl. Next, he lands a kick on her, making her fly away. She had her guard down for having cancelled the barrier. Seriously wounded, she asks what is going on. Then she notices Inor's body moving. He grabs his head and puts it back on his body, and sighs, as if it was uncomfortable. Alright, looks like it worked. Even the Myrtle sword didn't work against him. That magic sword was useful against demons of this world. But in the world he came from, it didn't work that way. Of course, Egiana wasn't understanding anything. He hadn't really recovered the arm, just wanted her to think the sword worked. Smiling, she says he surprised her. Our young guy was smarter than people thought. Even Inor thought the vampire's weak spot was the head. But no, it was the heart. He discovered this when fighting Fenrir and taking severe blows to the spine, but still survived. Almost lifeless, Egiana admits she lost. Inor assures he only won because he was very lucky. If she had discovered his weakness earlier, he would surely have lost. But even so, both gave their best in this battle. Before losing her life, Egiana said she had noticed something too. She knew Inor wasn't just any guy. However, now he would use her body to gain more power. Said he could turn her into a ghoul, a kind of vampire zombie. But that would be boring, so he was going to finish her once and for all. That way he ends up training her mana. Later he goes to the prison where the heroes were locked. They realize it was Inor there. They can't believe what they are seeing. Our young guy said he brought a magic tool to open the prison cell. The girls start asking if he was okay, saying they were worried. He immediately casts a hypnosis spell on the girls. Ryut asks what this boy is doing. Relax there, boy, I don't want to hurt them, and orders them out of the cell. Not even Ryuto escaped our hero's hypnosis. But since Ryuto was a bit stronger, he was resisting. The spell should be working, but it seems he's blocking his part. Alright, I'll give an order just for you two. I want you to clean all this mess for me. Let's erase all traces. Ryuto starts trembling after hearing this. Orders Adamaki to tell everyone he died, and after giving her a staff, asks her to burn the whole castle. It seems there was a seal suppressing all the girls' power, and he was going to break that protection. After that, he orders her to blow up the castle, destroying everything. As soon as she releases the maximum power, she gets super happy, saying she feels power flowing through her body. Ryuto tells her to wait, not to destroy everything, because that would end many lives. But since she was hypnotized, there was nothing he could do to stop it. With the sacred staff in hand, she says she will do her best. Already prepares to make a colossal explosion. As the explosion begins, all the corridors are destroyed. Nothing will remain inside the castle. They were inside the almost protective barrier, and even so, Inori comments it was hot in there. After releasing her power from that seal, it seems she became extremely powerful. He even thinks those almost blessings are really overpowered. Hey Ruto, I'll trust you with delivering the truth. And Ruto stays there cornered, trembling all over. From the city, people see the castle in flames, and wonder what was happening to the royal family. It seems no one knew what had happened. We also noticed the silhouette of a girl watching everything. She was looking at the totally destroyed castle. We see she looks a lot like that character from the beginning of the story. And this woman remembers the princess's prison, also doesn't remember anything, and finally recalls memories of her parents. That black-haired girl was Alha. The former second princess was gone, and now a new character was born, with jet black hair. She says goodbye to the family and the old house. Inori asks if she was finished already, but she questions if the cleaning was done, and I want to ask you how she knows that. Actually, when she received part of Inori's power, she also gained some memories. That is, it wasn't just her hair color that changed. I personally really like this appearance. Since he turned her into a vampire, it seems they made a pact. She would have to obey everything he ordered. He asks if that was okay for her, and she says yes. Then he ends up asking for something not very nice. She slaps him in the face, and leaves all angry. From afar, he keeps complimenting her hair, says she became very beautiful. It seems the girl knew he was just saying that to tease her. Later, he complained that her slap hurt a lot. The girl smiles, thinking she might get along very well with him, even having lost her family and princess titles. Now she gained some freedom and was grateful to him for that. She also found something she should do, a purpose in life. She would like to become stronger than Inori and win her own freedom. As soon as she got stronger than him, she would defeat him. So the young guy didn't expect that, and smiles, saying he accepts the challenge. Soon after, he gets up, says that now that the ex-princess's wish is decided, they should go to the base to live. What do you mean have a base? He says it's a safe place, near the city. They reach Fenrir's barrier. The girl didn't expect that. He managed to find this perfect place because it had an undetectable illusion barrier for normal humans. The girl asks when he made this cabin. He says he made it using his power. It was a simple fortress, made with the weapon forging technique. It was a little small for 2 people, and he said compared to the castle, it was like that. Besides, it had only 1 bed. The girl gets embarrassed at the possibility of having to sleep together. She sits beside him and says she's not picky or anything. With flushed cheeks, says it would be nice just to be able to sleep together. Thanks to him, she had survived, so she didn't want to owe Inori anything. This would be a way to pay for her survival. He thinks about it, chuckles, saying she's very cheeky today, and orders her to take off her clothes. The girl didn't expect that, starts trembling nervously, but obeys the master's orders. He uses a magic technique called Morgan's Magical Eye of Vision. Holding the girl's clothes, he uses the weapon forging technique. This technique didn't forge just weapons and cabins, but also clothes, as we saw before. He gives her a new outfit. The girl is surprised, holding a black dress. He covers it up, saying he did that so she wouldn't be wearing those old rags. Said he saved her and made her his subordinate, not so she would pay for her own desires. Besides, he chooses his partners very well. He didn't want her just to pay like that. He even says she is too confident to offer that kind of thing. The girl is dying of embarrassment, not knowing where to put her face. She even starts stuttering, not knowing what to say. Soon after, she dresses and thanks for the clothes. He teases, calling the girl doll princess. Later, she goes outside, starts crying, saying she had ruined everything. Why did I offer myself like that? Was I just trying to show my determination? From afar, she watches the Kalman castle. Since she was the only survivor of the family and abandoned her country, maybe she did that as a form of punishment. Our hero was there listening to everything, asks if, by any chance, sleeping with him was something punitive. The girl is surprised. Besides, says he is being rude, but it was none of that. She was very grateful he saved her life, and it was just a misunderstanding. She was just trying to understand why she was so offered. Moreover, now she was no longer human, even becoming a vampire. She was very thankful he saved her life. I just want to watch, said there was something he wanted her to do immediately. She agrees, and he starts explaining that he learned many skills during the castle battles, learned a technique called romantic technique, and wanted to test it with her. The girl repeats the words, not knowing exactly what he means, and, imagining nonsense, of course she refuses. The guy says it was an order, and she should accept. I'd at least like to touch her if you know what I mean. The girl steps back, saying that's not healthy. You have to accept. You said you'd help me. So they go back into the cabin. Some time passes. Aldi became stronger, acquired many skills, and even managed to fly in the sky, just like our hero. He also got stronger, leveled up many times, and while she trained, he asked the girl to go down to the limbo. She lands softly, and ends up undoing the spell on her wings. Yeah, seems she got very good at flying. The young guy asks if she wanted him to make some adjustments to the clothes, and she said no, it was comfortable. What intrigued Inori was that she could normally use her powers during the day. Seems she didn't have the sun curse. Handing her a sword, he said to test this new weapon. Looking at the sword, she realized it had great power, and even asked if he made that beautiful blade. The young guy said he used his weapon forging skill. Holding that sword Alha was using, it was an ancestral weapon, so it had extraordinary power. However, when our young guy tried to use it, it was not very effective. That's because he doesn't have the mana of this world, but his energy is from another world, the world he went to at the beginning of the story. That meant he couldn't use magical tools, including this sword. That's why he was giving this sword to her, so she could master it. Are you sure about that, Inori? I might use it against you. Don't worry about that, I can get much stronger without relying on these weapons. And he also said that their competition to see who would get stronger didn't necessarily depend on weapons, so he decided to recap what they had discovered so far. Unlike him, Alha could use magical tools from this world, but unlike him, she couldn't level up. The girl said it didn't matter that she couldn't level up, because she would get stronger than him no matter what. The young guy teased, saying that the fact he could gain levels was a huge advantage. When he was leaving, the girl said she had arranged a program for him. He asks what she was talking about, and the girl shows her vampire fangs. She wanted to explain that now she could get stronger by sucking energy from monsters, just like he does. He even asks what kind of monster she sucks from. Now that they had mastered their powers, they could leave that cabin and go to another country. At that moment, she hears someone calling them. It was Fenrir, in the form of a very cute little wolf. He apologizes because they had to stay there a long time, as he wasn't recovering properly. Don't worry about that. It was my fault you got hurt. Alha is enchanted by the little wolf, saying he was very cute. Inori explains who he is. Poor Fenrir keeps asking the young guy to save him from that crazy girl. Right after, he jumps into the shadows and leaves. Alha feels sad since the little wolf went away. The guy gets angry down in the shadows, saying he's not a little wolf. She even gets a little silly, saying she wished to play more with him. The young guy asks if she happens to like animals. She says yes, since she took care of her sister's pets. But now they would have to go somewhere else. A new city. He hadn't decided yet where they would go, so he wanted to gather some information first. He even thinks about the possibility of going to a country without summoned heroes. But she said no such country exists. There isn't a single country in the world that hasn't summoned heroes. Is it true that every country has heroes? Yes, every country, there is an agreement called the 32 Heroes, where each country summons heroes to help fight the Demon King. The boy asks if that's not an exaggeration. In other words, in this world, there are 32 heroes who were summoned, and all of them received training to defeat the Demon King. The king and the two girls were heading to another kingdom, so our heroes realized the plans would be a little more difficult. In this world, many races existed. We see someone arriving in a war zone with many dead people. A white-haired girl was performing a ritual, holding a glowing skull. Gradually, that skull took form, turning into a very powerful demon. That man was coming to life. It seems that at that moment they summoned a Demon King. The next day, Alha, along with Inori, arrived in a kingdom. The girl was very beautiful. This new country had a slightly different culture. Some time passed and Alha began to become popular in the city. People even offered items to her. The girl had changed her name from Alha to Ari. That was her new nickname. It had been a while since they arrived in that city, Regen, within the sacred kingdom of Lean. It was a commercial transit city, characterized by its large brick buildings. She was surprised by the liveliness of the people there. It was a small city but had many clergy members, and even a gigantic church in the place. Besides that, she had registered with the Adventurers Guild to earn money by doing some missions. Inori also got a nickname, which was Kiri. Since he spent the whole day drinking and sleeping, she was the one working. Thanks to that, she got to meet many different people. While she was passing in front of the bar, our hero was thrown far away. The guy fell on top of her, his face all bruised, and the blow was so strong it knocked everything down. She turns around, not understanding anything, calling Inori, and then corrects herself, saying Kiri. A religious woman comes out from inside, laughing. "I'm surprised. Who would have thought you didn't lose consciousness after I hit you?" Alha watches this woman hitting Inori. As she walked toward our hero, the woman said she liked him, and introduces herself as the Divine Knight of the Sacred Kingdom of Lean, Fanatic and Lacey's. She also said she was going to rehabilitate our hero. She pulls him by the tie. Meanwhile, Alha stays in the back, not understanding what was happening. She was surprised because a girl was holding her master's face. They had arrived in a new city, and she had gotten a new job. Besides that, they were meeting new people. That's how her new life began, after leaving her country. Yeah, my daughter. The path says that, but it will get worse from here on. Going back a bit in the story, our hero spent all day drinking, and got the name Kiri. The guy literally stayed all day at the bar. That bothered people, who said he was very lazy. Besides drinking a lot, he made a mess, and still kept hitting on the waitresses. Completely the opposite of the area she was assuming. With important positions inside the guild, doing missions, she even earned the title of Black Rose. That was because of the black dress she wore, and it matched her very charming appearance. So much that even other adventurers fell in love. Meanwhile, our hero was there, just drinking beer all day. People even asked what the Black Rose saw in that guy, who was a scoundrel. One of the men asked why this guy didn't just start working to change his life, since it was shameful to leave only women paying the bill while he stayed all day at the bar. The cause of that were the several punches he took from Fanatic. That girl was crazy, and she still said it was some kind of training. Inori remembered that her name was Fanatic, and that she also said she was a Templar, but he didn't know why her hits hurt so much. Using his perception skills, he tried to predict the attacks, but since her hits were light effect, they caused great damage to a vampire. She had noticed that he had a very good body and thought it was a pity his body was so weak. Inori realized she was very cunning, and after giving another very strong punch in his face, she said he should endure a bit more. While he asked for a break, Arya was there in the back watching everything. She even asked Fenrir, who was beside her, if it wasn't better to help the master. But the little wolf said the master only asked for help in case of emergency. Even Arya knew he would get out of there without much effort. And that's what he did. Our protagonist ran away. He didn't want to keep getting beaten. And that's how he arrived at the tavern and told the old man, "I've never run this much in my life." The boy's proposal was that Templar was a person who made offers to demons. That's why many of them chose the light element path. And when it comes to elements, a person's natural talent is super important because it defines their techniques. But since our hero couldn't use magical tools, learning those skills wouldn't be very useful. At that moment, he asked how the old man knew he couldn't use those magical tools. But Fanatic ends up arriving and ruining the mood. "My god, woman, get off my back." She came after him, calling for training, and dragged the poor guy away while he begged for help. The old man said he wouldn't help because they weren't friends. And moreover, everyone should take care of their own problems. I don't know if you guys realized who this hero is, but I won't spoil it. Keep watching. Our protagonist was exhausted. That was no training at all. It was more like a one-sided beating. If this continued, our protagonist would end up in the grave. So she suggested they continue training at the church. And when they got there, she got all excited. Meanwhile, the young guy wondered what he was doing with his life. He could run away from training, or stay there to investigate a bit more about that mysterious church. The chapel had a pleasant silence, but Inori wasn't a big fan of those divine things. He even wondered where the other worshippers were, since it was only him and Fanatic, and he kept staring at that sinister statue, smiling. He realized life in that world was quite different from his own, so he couldn't exactly use the evaluation skill in that space. As soon as the other worshippers arrived, he tried to evaluate their connection, and he had to put in a lot of effort to see it. Then finally he found it. Inside that statue there was a magic stone. It was the sacred light stone. The religious people were connecting to the statue through that stone, and the goddess of that statue didn't look anything like the blonde goddess who summoned him. Since there were 5 gods, he guessed it was another one. He even thought he was getting involved with some very dangerous people from that world. At that moment, Fanatic found someone and got all shaky. It was a war hero named Raven. She explained he was a hero of the regime of that city, and even one of the 4 great Holy Knight captains. 10 years ago, he defended that city from a horde of monsters, and ended up becoming a living legend. He was basically Fanatic's superior. She said goodbye to Kiri, and said she would meet the knight, and our protagonist was left alone and abandoned. Since he was a hero in that city, our protagonist decided to evaluate if he was as strong as Egiana. At that moment, the guy noticed he was being watched. Our hero tried to hide. Did he discover I'm using my evaluation skill? A nun asked the knight if everything was alright, and he said he smelled something. A smell of someone of his kind. Is he a summoned knight, guys? The scene shifts to another day, with our hero training with Fanatic. Arya was watching everything, even feeling very bored. Since he arrived, he had been spending many hours training with that Templar, and for that reason, our dear gothic heroine wasn't talking much with our hero. The Templar had already noticed he had no talent to use magical tools. Ah, thank you very much for letting me know, and that was why he stayed only on defense. He would need to use some attack weapon. Well, he even had attack weapons. They were precisely those dark magic daggers. But of course, he wasn't going to say he could use those. So he made an excuse and said he didn't have any weapon. So it was decided. She hit our hero right in the middle of his legs with a hammer, and said that tomorrow he should buy a weapon that suited him, since she never saw adventurers walking around empty-handed. Besides, tomorrow's training was cancelled because she had a meeting with Raven, so he should spend the whole day choosing a proper weapon. As she said goodbye, he promised he would look for that tomorrow. He approached Ari, and asked if she was analyzing his training just to find a weak point and defeat him. But the girl said it wasn't that. She and Fenrir were taking turns on watch and hadn't discovered anything in that city. They were there to gather information, and it seemed the mission wasn't having much effect. Since he was standing next to her, Arya asked if he needed anything. Then he asked if she would be free tomorrow, because he wanted her help to choose a weapon, and even said it would be great if she went with him, especially since she knew the city's shops well. But if she was busy, he would go by alone. At that moment, she happily stood up, saying she would definitely help him, especially because he couldn't do anything without her. And now they would go home to prepare things. She already started pulling our hero's hand. Wait, girl, why are you so excited like this? The next day, he was in the city center. While eating a skewer, she said it was very delicious. Looks like you only came to enjoy the street food, right? Oh no, of course not. We came to buy your weapon, didn't we? And so they decided to go to a shop. Arriving there, they noticed there were many weapons of various different shapes. That place seemed really good, especially since Arya had heard in the guild it was a recommended shop. He used his analysis skill and saw the weapons were even good. However, most were magical and wouldn't serve him. The girl picked up a gigantic scythe and asked if it wasn't very cute, but of course our hero refused. It seemed it would be difficult to find a weapon that satisfied the master's wishes. Arya, I think you should take the chance and buy a weapon for yourself too. After all, that black katana draws a lot of attention, and you would need a weapon to use daily. She thought something compact would be more convenient, so he showed her a myrtle dagger. The girl was surprised by that weapon, and since it was compact, it would be exactly what she needed. When analyzing it with his skill, he saw it was made of high-purity myrtle and worked as a magical conductor. It was very expensive, but Inori said she shouldn't worry about the price, since he was hunting many monsters at night. After all, he was gathering a lot of money, and only spent it on alcohol, not on anything real. Arya's cheeks flushed, dying of embarrassment, and so they ended up making the purchase. In the end, he didn't find any weapon that satisfied his desires. It seems offering the myrtle dagger to a girl had a deep meaning, and she asked if he knew what that meant. Since the young guy wasn't from this world, he had no idea. So she disguised it, giggled, and said she wouldn't tell the real meaning. They found another weapon shop that was a bit hidden. Upon arriving, they noticed there were spider webs. Arya was terrified, since the place seemed somewhat dangerous. And when they approached, our hero realized it was a special shop. There was a man waiting for the two of them. When they got closer, he welcomed them. Our hero found it a bit suspicious. The old man said they worked only with orders, making unique custom-made weapons. He asked if they also made weapons that weren't magical, and that wasn't a problem for the shop, as they always dedicated themselves to meeting customers' expectations. With that, Inori used his detection power, and shortly after said he wanted to place an order. He was chosen very quickly. The old man said they should follow him to evaluate physical strength, skill, and other specific preferences. Inori asked if Arya could come along too. The old man agreed, saying it was no problem, even though the shop was a bit dirty and had spider webs in front. The old man explained that Spider had been there for quite some time and apologized for the inconvenience of having spider webs in the place. Later, they left the place and went to have some tea. The boy complained, saying it took longer than he thought. At least you decided quickly and didn't keep hopping from shop to shop. While drinking the tea, she noticed it tasted different. Actually, it was very delicious. It was quite different from the teas she drank in her country. Besides, the atmosphere and environment of this place were very different. She commented that she loved sitting there and enjoying a delicious tea. Inori asked why she didn't come alone, and she said the fun part was chatting. The girl asked how he decided so fast that the weapon would be bought at that shop. He said it was because he had used evaluation. All the weapons on display in the back were high quality. That's why he trusted that old man. Although he was a businessman, he wasn't a good salesman, since the shop was dirty. The crazy girl appeared asking if Kiri had managed to buy a weapon, and even mentioned she was looking for him. He had started calling this girl master. I didn't like that. Fanatic asked if he was flirting with Rosa Negra, making Arya embarrassed. The girl jumped on the balcony, while Arya said they were just companions. The masked man said Fanatic shouldn't be jumping off the railing, but should climb the stairs. She apologized, and the masked man said she should be an example for the people. This man introduced himself saying he was assigned as Fanatic's supervisor, and the guy's name was Mascara. Kiri asked why she needed a supervisor. Actually, the church was very strict, so they distrusted her relationship with her student Kiri. That's why they put a supervisor to watch her. The Templar Knights had to remain pure, and our hero kept saying he didn't want anything with her. The masked man found it strange that Rosa Negra was hanging out with the drunk Kiri, and even mentioned that rumors about the two were spreading through the city. The city was full of gossips, guys. People said Kiri was very lucky to have such a beautiful girl as a companion. The guy pulled a card out of his pocket and said he was part of Rosa Negra's fan club and asked Kiri for help to get women. The guy even bowed, begging, "Please, Kiri, help me with these women. I want to learn how you do it." The girls kept talking while the man insisted, asking for help. He really thought our protagonist was the greatest ladies' man in the world. Arya realized men were very easy to understand. Fanatic asked if Rosa Negra was really traveling with that drunk, and the girl answered yes. At that moment, the Templar saw she had a myrtle dagger and asked where she got it. Arya was a little embarrassed, especially since a dagger like that, given as a gift, was a symbol of a marriage proposal. Fanatic understood Kiri was declaring himself to her and told the masked man it was time to leave. The man said he wanted to talk more with our hero. "I'm glad we could talk," he said, and the gothic girl just laughed, agreeing. So the two left. Inori was quite exhausted since the day was tiring. The adventurer was thinking about Kiri, the adventurer, and realized our hero was a man whose true nature remained hidden. Arya had some things to take care of, and said he could leave then. She would stop by a few places first. It seemed Arya was quite busy at the Adventurers Guild. Since he was feeling lazy, he decided to go home right away. However, he ended up feeling something terrifying. It was a sensation he had never felt before. A white-haired woman asked if that boy had noticed her, and even mentioned he was very good. It seemed her voice was speaking directly in his mind. When he opened the door, there she was, on the balcony of the window. "Nice to meet you. My name is Sylphie. That voice echoing in your head is mine." He had already noticed her outside the room, but didn't know anything about spiritual magic. She heard rumors about him in the city, which made her curious about this so-called bum who just spent his days in the bar. She offered to teach spiritual magic and also to talk a little more about herself, and she immediately grabbed our guy's hand. The guy was dragged by the girl who climbed on top of him. "An unknown woman climbs on top of you, and you don't resist." "Yeah, my daughter. I may look like a fool, but I'm not a fool. I have a policy of accepting everything offered to me freely," he said, already starting to show interest in the girl. He tried to cast a mental interference spell. Hypnosis made at that distance would be impossible to avoid, but unfortunately for her, it didn't work. Then the woman locked Inori, and the guy was teleported to a green field. He didn't know where he was. She said that was her mental world. He could call it another dimension, something that existed inside every individual. In this world, she had total control over his mind, and could do whatever she pleased, like for example making Inori's clothes disappear. The guy was left naked, and some roots began climbing up his body. She said she could satisfy him however she wanted, but first he had to calm down. Then she would make his soul depend on her. The guy began to moan, and the roots were climbing his body. She knew our hero had never lain with any other girl, but he was doing very well, and still asked if he was afraid of being with a woman. He replied no, it wasn't fear. But before she could continue, a dark magic started appearing behind her. The girl got scared, and all the roots that held Inori were broken. That dark energy was very powerful, and it seemed she wasn't prepared for it, and we saw our protagonist had a demonic appearance. The woman asked how a mere human soul could do something like that. She wasn't the one controlling him. It was our hero who was completely absorbing her. When it comes to domination, I'm quite skilled. At that moment, Arya knocked on the door and asked why he left it open, and since it was unlocked, she entered. When she arrived, she saw a white-haired woman on top of her companion, and they were kissing. The guy asked why Arya came back so early, and she already drew her dagger. The young guy pushed the woman to the floor and she fell half hypnotized. Inside her mouth was a little fairy. He ended up spitting the fairy out. She fell to the ground all covered in saliva. She had received a divine revelation from the supreme god to try to seduce him, but instead she ended up being dominated. That was Sylphie, the highest-ranking wind spirit, who was dominated by Inori. Our protagonist asked if she could really give Arya that information, and she said she only did it because of the hypnosis. Holding her by the wing, he asked if the church ordered this. Probably yes. And Arya asked, "Who is this supreme god? Tell me everything you know. About yourself, supreme god, about spiritual magic. Tell me every detail." The poor little fairy was dying of fear, but since she was a high-ranking spirit, she wasn't going to reveal everything so easily. She even had the courage to resist the hypnosis spell, so he said he would use his romance technique, the same technique she used to try to be with Zillow, and he already slapped the fairy. Oh, look who was watching this. Realizing the scene was quite embarrassing, and even covered her face not to see that scene. The fairy started screaming because of Inori's techniques, and soon after she fainted. I'm sure you understood very well what happened. Now that he left her exhausted with his techniques, she should spill everything she knew. The girl thinks that since he doesn't know spiritual magic techniques, he must be very weak. And just like him, the fairy also couldn't use spiritual magic. She had lured them to a remote forest, and he was surprised that a fairy couldn't use magic, and asked what the hell she could do. The little fairy got angry and told him to shut up. She had tried to use magic, and her hair turned black, Maybe because of the domination technique. Our hero's domination technique didn't work on living beings. It only worked on the fairy because she wasn't considered a living being in the spiritual world. Now that she was under his control, he could use her for some things. Inori asked where these spirits exist, and she said they are everywhere. They literally were in every corner of the kingdom. If someone could use spiritual magic without being noticed, that could be a big problem. So he asked if she could make them see these spirits, and she said she would try. Thus she used her power, and the spirits were revealed. It was incredible and very beautiful, and the two were enchanted, saying it was very cool to see low-ranking spirits. Oh, she even commented that Sylphie was amazing, and the fairy said she really was amazing, since she was a high-ranking spirit. Even if she couldn't use spiritual magic, she was a high-ranking spirit, and she was useful because she could hide someone else's spiritual magic. Inori realized this ability was very valuable, and even said she could be useful, and the girl became very happy. While she was testing her powers, she discovered something. She didn't know if it was wind magic, but she realized she could control something black, and he called it black wind, although it acted more like smoke than like wind. Inori kept watching that ability, and realized that this little fairy would be very useful. Later they were training and ended up defeating the monster. We see that it was a giant centipede, and he used that black wind technique, leaving Arya quite surprised. This ability was very powerful, and would have many functionalities. Thus, the boy didn't know that this power could be used that way. If it weren't a demon world monster, it would have been destroyed, and Inori asks what that means in the demon world. So Sylphie says that even though this beast is demonic, it's normally only found in the demon world, and it was strange for it to be in a place like this, especially since this Arya wasn't suitable for demon beasts. It was like finding a fish in the desert. Arya asks if Asiulf had ever been to the demon world, and she said obviously not. The forest spirits were agitated. That meant something was disturbing Elise. And even if Inori could see the spirits, he wouldn't know much about their behavior. However, this Arya was protected by the Holy Kingdom's priest knights, so basically the spirits should have been feeling safe. That's why it was so strange for a demon world monster to be in a forest like that. Inori got thoughtful, imagining something was happening, and even asked if the fairy had any idea how that creature appeared there. From afar we see someone watching Ellis, and it was a hooded person. The next day, our hero goes to the shop to get his weapon. It was a longsword, single-edged, made by Sebastian, and of high quality. Arya claps her hands. That sword seemed to have been made exactly for him. I heard, old man, that you're going to move your shop. The old man had decided to move to another city, and he was his last client. After receiving payment, the old man said they could meet again somewhere else, and so they said goodbye. They returned to the streets, and Arya comments that the sword was quite expensive, and thankfully they had enough money. Actually, it was Fnatic who gave the money, and she asks why he accepted. Actually, it was the Templar who ordered him to buy the weapon, so he accepted the money. The girl scolds him, saying he shouldn't have accepted, as it was rude. Later we see Fnatic praying, and soon after she meets Inori outside the temple. He shows his new sword that he had bought. It's a high-quality sword, it's solid and practical for real combat. Yeah, I was lucky to find a good blacksmith. Looking up, he said it's a shame he can't use magical tools, because his body can't handle magic. Even if he continued training with her, he wouldn't get stronger. Fnatic just watches him say those words, and then asks if by chance he was tired of training with her. He had hated it from the start, since he wasn't going to learn anything, so it made no sense to keep training with her, as it would be a waste of time. Besides, she would also be wasting time doing those useless trainings. And knowing him, she jokes saying he could spend his whole life training and still be a weakling, and if needed she would stay by his side all her life, since her specialty was believing in people. The young guy didn't care much about that, and that crazy girl really seemed very eager to keep training with him. The guy even jokes, saying she was very stubborn. He had no choice, so he decided to try a little harder in her training. Back at the bar, people keep looking at Inori, and they were annoyed because he didn't stop talking nonsense. Even the little fairy was laughing. That's because Mascara was trying to learn skills on how to woo women, and during the last few days, they ended up becoming bar buddies. As incredible as it seemed, a masked man was good at conversation. At that moment, Inori points his finger at a beautiful girl who was appearing. This woman marched with very graceful steps, but her aura was so frightening it scared the men away. That was exactly Harry, and she was furious because of Inori's actions. The two ended up getting punched in the head, and she even said they shouldn't have those vulgar conversations inside the tavern. Right after, she apologized to the people from Burger, who had to listen to those rude things they were saying. Inori asks Mascara if he shouldn't be supervising Fnatic. Actually, he was only supervising her because the religious leaders thought she was having an affair with Nesaroi. Besides, now she was in the middle of an exam at the church. This was a city where the princesses, these priestesses, came to take promotion exams. The test was so hard that the Templars could even die. That's why he wasn't there watching her. At that moment, our young guy realizes that Fnatic only came to this city to take that exam. The girl had been working hard these days, and the masked man says she was doing her best and even made it to the finals. At that moment, the bell rings and everyone turns toward Burger's door. It was that man arriving. People get uncomfortable looking at the hooded man. Our hero says an old man arrived at the right time, but it seems the old man didn't want to sit with him to drink together. The young guy even says the old man was stingy, and Mascara decides to leave. He also told Arya he would apologize properly another day. The young guy was sad because he lost his drinking companion, and the old man says he should choose his friends better. Ah, old man, I don't want to hear sermons from someone who doesn't even have friends. "Egerson, bring me another drink." At that moment, the fairy inside him feels a huge shiver. She even asks how he managed to endure that without saying anything. The aura of that man was quite frightening. She felt such great pressure that she could barely move her arms. Besides that, the hooded man felt the presence of spirits. Even Inori began to feel it. The old man even mentions that Inori has a new companion, and it was a spirit. The young guy starts to get really scared. The old man tells him not to be so suspicious. That means this is the right moment. You can see souls, can't you? And also the abilities of other people. Arya watches that scene and finds it a little strange. Then our hero decides to activate his power. This man's name was Ignoa. He was a mix of several races: Mangi, Dragon Elf, Beastman, Chimera, Homunculus, Human, and Demon tribes. And he was also Ignoa, the current Demon Lord. The guy freezes, not knowing how to react, and finally, ends up feeling sick. Arya notices that Inori was very intense. She had never seen him like that before. The man says there are many people nearby and it would be better if they talk somewhere else. He even calls our hero Takafuji Nori, as if he knew his real name. Arya realizes that old man knew her companion's true name. Then he stands up, saying it would be good for them to talk somewhere else. Arya asks what happened to Inori and if he was okay. She even wanted to go along, but he ordered her not to follow him. The girl froze, as she couldn't move when he gave orders. So they go to the surrounding forest to talk in private. Of course, the girl was very worried, since her companion was with a man who seemed extremely powerful. So they enter the forest. The old man tells him to stay calm. Stay calm. Yeah, right. That's how it is, my son. In front of the Demon King. However, our hero wasn't saying anything, just dying of fear. I guess asking you not to be on alert in this situation is asking too much, right? He activates a protective barrier with his power. This makes the fairy faint and leave his body. Now that the fairy was unconscious, they could finally talk alone. He takes the hood off his head and shows that he had animal ears. What do you think when you look at me? Animal ears, demon horn, scales, long ears, and body fur. Well, your appearance is kind of messy, isn't it? The man laughs and says his appearance is really horrible. Besides, he also has a tail. He was originally just a common demon, and he got this body during his second reincarnation. He knew Inori had also reincarnated in this world, since he himself went through it. At first, he was born in this world as a normal demon. He was the Demon King from 2 generations ago. Even as a common demon, he was born with extraordinary power and defeated everyone who dared to challenge him. That's why he ended up becoming the Lord of Darkness. He obtained everything: women, money, and power, and kept laughing. After eliminating several demons, he started defeating many other races. Humans summoned heroes to eliminate him, but they failed. Finally, he defeated the dwarves and stole all their treasures. He even wiped out a forest full of elves and fairies. And he did all this in search of happiness. He thought that would bring him joy, but in the end, he got nothing. Inori asks if after that he ended up dying, and Ignoa says he didn't find anyone who could defeat him, and ended up losing his life over time. Soon after dying, he went to a blank space, without features, and there he found a woman with blonde hair. He was before a goddess. This blank space was the same one Inori had visited, and even wondered if it was the same goddess. Ignoa says this god introduced himself as the lord of this world. Then Inori realized it wasn't the same goddess. She used her powers to make him lose all his memories. Besides that, she took all his magical power and strength. Everything, absolutely everything, was taken from him. Right after, she sent him to the abandoned world, the Forgotten World. Our protagonist asks what this abandoned world is, and Ignora says it's the world where Inori came from. This world was called that because it had been abandoned by the gods. The earth had lost everything and had nothing special there. He was born into an ordinary family and had a very normal appearance. He had no special qualities and was never praised, even if he tried hard. He started working normally, graduated from college, and started a family. He married a woman who wasn't very beautiful, but he liked her very much. When their son was born, he was a very cute little boy. The household finances were a real mess, and because of that, he always fought with his wife. But in the end, he was happy. That was true happiness. When he was the Demon Lord, he had conquered the whole world and thought that would bring him satisfaction. But in the end, he just lived a false reality. It took 2 lives for him to learn what true happiness was. He wasn't telling Inori he wanted to make everyone happy, but he could do great things since he had a strong body again. Our hero wonders if his goal was to go around killing everyone, and the old man replied no. He was summoned to this world as a homunculus, also known as Chimera. Basically, he was a mix of 6 races: demons, humans, beasts, dwarves, elves, and draconic. These 6 races kept fighting in this world, waging endless wars. Our hero got a little tense hearing these words from the old demon, and the guy even commented that there were too many races. As our hero could see, he was avoided by all humans. This world was intentionally created by God so that different races wouldn't understand each other. Maybe Inori didn't understand that because he came from another world. In this world, there was nothing but conflicts. The hybrids were discriminated against, and it was full of oppressed races. So how do you intend to save them? He asked. The old man put the cigar in his mouth and said he wanted to destroy this twisted world, and asked if the boy would help him. It seems our protagonist didn't like the idea very much. No. The old man said that at first he found Inori alone, and in the end he changed his mind. "Are you going to threaten me so I'll be on your side or something?" asked the boy. The old man laughed and said he was free to do whatever he wanted. Actually, all that information was his way of paying an advance cooperation fee. Even if he didn't intend to, the boy would end up cooperating with his goal no matter the cost. In the end, our protagonist would help him. Inori didn't quite understand what the old man meant, but found it interesting. They exchanged glances. Then the boy said it was a somewhat selfish way to put it. But in the end, the old man was right. He would end up doing that even without being told, and even asked if the old man would give a cooperation fee. So the old man didn't expect that. Arya had been trapped in the tavern because our brother didn't follow her. The girl was extremely worried, since our brother was leaving with the mysterious man. She even reached out, calling for him. After Inori left, the girl got even more worried. She was in the forest, dying of anxiety. She even thought Inori could die because of that old man. That's because she had never seen our hero so worried like that. But since she had received orders, she couldn't do anything. At that moment, some creatures tried to attack the girl, and the fanatic appeared asking what Arya was doing in a place like that. Since that forest was dangerous, the crazy girl hammered the monsters until she destroyed a tree. Like it or not, this crazy girl is very useful. The monsters ran away, and Arya thanked the fanatic for saving her life. The Templar said it was very dangerous to stay in a place like that, especially with the Tombaisha guard nearby. And since she was the famous Black Rose, probably something was afflicting her mind, since she seemed distracted. Actually, that was true, but the girl said it was nothing. The fanatic's perception was very high, and she knew Arya was worried about Kiri, so she tries to hit our girl with her hammer. Luckily, the Gothic girl dodges the attack, and even asks what the Templar was trying to do. She said she just wanted to see the real strength of Arya, the so-called Black Rose. Besides that, she wanted to cheer the girl up a bit, but Arya said that wasn't her business. Spinning the hammer, she tries another attack, but Arya manages to dodge, and even said the girl had great reflexes. Out of nowhere, she starts making conversation, saying that when she was a child, she didn't believe in gods. And what do I have to do with that? She says that when she was little, she saw her mother praying. Her mother was very devoted, a person who never missed her daily prayers. However, when she was a child, monsters attacked her village. Her mother had died in that attack, and that was the first time the fanatic stopped to pray. At that moment, a god appeared and saved her, using a magic barrier. To this day, she doesn't know who really appeared there to save her. But from that day on, she started believing in God. Since then, she doesn't pray only for herself, but also for other people. Arya should also pray for Kiri, so he could be helped. She really wanted to help our hero, but she couldn't. If you can't help him practically, at least stay by his side. I also wanted to be by Kiri's side, but I can't do that now. After shouting these words, Arya punches that crazy girl in the face. Right after, she apologizes, asking if the Templar was okay. Her nose started bleeding. She even got a red face, saying Arya has a very strong punch, and that was enough to make the girl faint. Arya runs over to see if her colleague was okay. The Templar says she also worries about Kiri, but since she doesn't know him well, it would be hard to help him. She thought that since the Black Rose was always with him, she would know more about the boy. The Gothic girl smiles and even said she imagined the Templar could do greater things, thanks to her power. It was late at night, and our hero still hadn't arrived. Arya was very worried, and suddenly he appeared from a shadow on the ceiling. He says this was the easiest way to get home. He had gathered a lot of information with that old man and would tell her later. Since he had returned, she assumes he wasn't hurt. The young guy asks if she was worried about him, and she said yes. If you simply died in this place and I was freed for the happy ending, this story would be pretty mediocre. If he died, it wasn't guaranteed she would be freed. The young guy gets thoughtful, looking at her. It was nice to have a beautiful girl worried about him. A bit curious, she asks what happened, and he said nothing happened. She seemed very energetic, and after a while, he would need her help for a small experiment. She didn't mind helping him, but found it strange he said that with a little laugh. He assures it won't be dangerous, but still she had a bad feeling. The scene changes to the next day, at the church, with some women crouching. They were in a room, and an old man appears asking if that man didn't come. The man appears surprised by someone's arrival. Who appeared was the masked man. He asks what the old man needs, and he says it's nothing important. He was just wondering if he had managed to find Betrayal's runaway daughter. According to the plan, she should be doing her job, and he asks for a little more time. They throw a robe over a girl lying on the floor, and she had the church's faith symbol. The old man asks the masked man to bring more girls to do the job, and says he needs to gather more priestesses. To gather followers of vows, his prestige was necessary, and he asks if the man agrees. Putting his hand on his chest, the masked man said everything was in the name of God. After arriving at his room, the man takes off the mask. He looked quite troubled, and repeated the name Chris, saying he couldn't think of getting rid of him. A little far from there, someone was watching the castle. It was a white-haired girl with some demons behind her, those centipede demons. She looked very serious, as if she nurtured some bad feeling. It's still not enough, but I will grow much more. First, I'll devour this whole forest. After saying that, she orders the centipedes to attack the forest, and next would be the kingdom of Hagen. The next day, early, Arya goes out shopping. The fairy asks, "Is your lord always lazy?" And Arya said that during the day he only sleeps. That means if I try to escape, I have to do it during the day. They had arrived. They had gone to a coffee shop. The fairy was surprised because the cake was huge. Cake was Arya's favorite food, and the fairy said that fairies don't eat anything. What? How come you don't eat? That's right. Spirits don't need food like humans do. So you don't have a favorite food or something like that. She didn't know that, and she felt a little sad because she wanted to have a nice afternoon tea with the little fairy. She even apologized, saying she imagined the fairy would be happy. After much insistence, the fairy ended up agreeing to eat. She was only going to try, saying that fairies don't need human food. while the complainant took a bite and began to taste it. And after swallowing, she realized the cake's flavor was magnificent. She even mentioned that she had never tasted anything so delicious. And Arya started to mention several human foods that are delicious. After a while, she even had a full belly from eating so much. She didn't imagine that human food could be so delicious. They really were amazing. Arya tells the fairy to be quiet and not to tell Inori that they came without him, and even agrees to come back another day. So I comment that Arya is very different from Inori. She is kind. Arya tries to defend her companion, saying that he is kind too. It's because she doesn't know him well. However, a day will come when she will crush him. There was a time when he was kind and saved her life, and from then on she has been under his control. She says seriously that she is very grateful he saved her life. However, she planned to surpass him. The little fairy just watches with her belly full, and even mentions that their relationship is a little strange. At that moment, Fenrir appears asking where our hero was. The fairy asks who that was, and Arya says that was Fefe, but the wolf didn't like that nickname. The little fairy finds that nickname very cute, and Fenrir keeps saying he will devour her. When we left the house, he was in the room. Could he have left? Fenrir said he needed help to go to the forest, and didn't know if he could call it a forest, since everything was destroyed. And so they go there. The place looked post-apocalyptic. All the trees were destroyed, and there was no more life there. Not only the monsters and spirits, but also all the trees and grasses. Fenrir asks what the hell passed through there to cause such great destruction, and so Kay mentions that even the smallest spirits were completely uprooted. She thinks humans really are despicable beings. But anyway, Arya was going to investigate, and immediately opens her wings. So I'm surprised, because I didn't know my partner could fly just like me. They were looking for who caused this destruction. After a while, Fenrir asks if they discovered anything. It's exactly as I thought. The footprints on this side are more recent. If I combine it with the information Sylphie gathered, I can find out where they are going. But why would they do that? So Fen mentions that the spirits ahead are agitated, and they end up noticing something behind the mountain plains. There was a legion of centipedes heading to the city. They were running very fast, and causing destruction wherever they passed. The girl realized those were the magical animals they had found in the forest before. So Fenvis says they need to warn the city quickly because it would be destroyed, and they decide to fly faster to have time to warn everyone. She didn't know if that was a simple monster race, or an order really trying to destroy everything on the way. But what really mattered was that this order was heading to the city. All the inhabitants of that small town could be killed. And just thinking about that, she was already worried. So she tells herself she will do everything to save these people. There was no important movement from the church or guild to contain the creatures. So Fida says that, in other words, they don't know what is happening. Then she asks Fenrir to find Inori and bring help. He could go look, but asks if Inori would really be able to stop the monsters. She knew our hero was hiding his power, but still, she didn't know if he had enough strength to do it. Since the monsters were very fast, they would reach the city well before them. She thinks of Nala and also her little sister Amanda. She didn't have enough strength to save her friend and her sister, but she would give her best to save the city. Sensing the smell, Fenrir knew those creatures were powerful, but even so, Arya goes after them to try to eliminate them. She couldn't just stand there watching. The monster was walking, then looked back and saw there was a threat. So Fidi warns they were discovered, and the creature goes after Arya, intending to eliminate her. She was tired of just standing and watching. At that moment, something explodes the creature's head. Fenrir warns that Arya's magical power was leaking even before she drew her sword, and he starts devouring the monsters. Her technique might be immature, but her spirit, fighting for what she wanted to protect, was magnificent. He says he would help her, but that this form of his wouldn't last long. He decided to fight because this was the land he protected. The girl says Fenrir had grown a lot, and he gets angry, saying his name is Fenrir. The creatures turn to the wolf, and Arya appears, cutting the creature in half. Not bad, little girl. She wasn't gonna just stand there watching, and says she will help him in the battle. And that way they start eliminating the monsters. There were many creatures and more kept coming. Besides being strong, they were very resistant. Fenrir realizes he was getting surrounded. First we must reduce their numbers and then think about eliminating the rest. She agrees with this strategy, and thus the great battle begins again. They start eliminating them one by one. Thus Fenrir realized that the little dog and the girl were really powerful. Even after being cut in half, the monsters kept moving, so they couldn't lower their guard against monsters they thought they had defeated. Arya knew this and kept striking. The energy consumption of that sword was no joke, so she decided to alternate, using magic. She casts a vacuum airball, and upon hitting the creature, her magic was thrown away. Her power didn't even cause a tickle. Fenrir says it's better for her to save magical power, especially since that sword drained a lot of mana. He more than anyone knew that sword was really powerful, especially since he had suffered a lot at Ijana's hands. Only someone powerful like her could extract 100% from that weapon. Arya comments that Fenrir knows that blade very well, since it was the one responsible for making him have that cute form. That's because he lost his energy and was still recovering. The monsters don't give time to think and attack again immediately. Thinking about Fenrir's tips, she knew she had to use that weapon more cautiously, and she makes an attack trying to save as much mana as possible. Fenrir was beside her to help. The girl comments that it's very difficult to master that sword. With her current magic control, she doesn't know how many more strikes she can deliver. After a few seconds, she knew she could only give 30 more attacks. If she kept going like that, her magical power would run out soon. The creatures kept coming, and Fenrir asks if she can't keep fighting. She screams desperately. Then they both realize she's taking drastic action. The girl decided to recover her mana by eating monster meat. Since she was a vampire, this was a practical way to gather energy. Fenrir gets scared, asking if she was really doing that. and Fenrir starts laughing, saying it's obvious a vampire would recover energy that way. After devouring a monster, she recovers strength and starts fighting again. That white-haired mage is surprised by this scene, and realizes someone was interfering in her mission, which was to destroy the city, so she joins her hands and casts a new spell. Because of that, the monsters further ahead decide to return to help in the battle. Arya realizes she's screwed because she's gathering too many monsters. Besides that, small insects start acting in a coordinated way. It seemed like everyone was being controlled by someone, so Fenrir shouts for Arya to run far away. Then the monster realizes she's trapped and attacks her. She tries to dodge but ends up being hit. Her arm is ripped off along with the sword. She screams in despair, because she doesn't have regenerative power like Inura. Fenrir logically was worried. The girl looks at her arm and realizes she's missing one hand. The centipede's tail, if you can call it a tail, hits her. She flies away, and right after, the monster tries to devour her. Fenrir tries to use the black wind technique, putting her in front as a protective barrier. Fenrir also launches his first spikes. They end up hitting the creature's eye. The battle was reaching catastrophic proportions, and poor Arya ends up falling to the ground. "You're still alive, girl, but I can't fight like this for much longer," so they would need to retreat. She was gradually losing consciousness. When she looked up, she saw her little sister Amanda. She was standing, looking at the fallen body on the ground. That seemed like an illusion. Amanda said that was pathetic, because Arya was in the same position she was before, and shows her mutilated arm. Evil-like, she asks if Arya would also abandon her like she did back in the kingdom, still provoking the gothic girl, saying she'll have her head cut off and will also die. However, Amanda asks why Arya was smiling. Getting up, she says Amanda would never say things like that. That was just a ghost created by her own weak heart. Taking her sword, she says she was happy to see her face after so long, but she knew it wasn't real. Amanda just watches. Arya says that back then she couldn't save her because she was weak. After apologizing, she asks Amanda to keep taking care of her, even if it's done from heaven. Thus, Fenrir realizes his friend hadn't died. On the contrary, she was awake and standing, more determined than ever. Fenrir asks her to get on his back so they can escape from there. However, the girl wanted to keep fighting and starts cutting the monsters. With determination, she cuts several creatures around her. Fenrir was surprised and didn't expect that. He asks Fenrir to flee ahead and seek help, while he would stay behind fighting. Inura appears, saying that keeping pride was good, but it wouldn't make sense to die for that. She uses her Gleipnir thread techniques and ties them to the girl's arm. He says that for a vampire, blood is life itself, and even asks if she doesn't value the energy he gave her, since the girl was risking her life for nothing. Inura, you came to get me? Did you lose your temper by chance? Do you really think you could defeat those creatures alone? After saying that, he stabs the sword into the monster's eye, and makes a very stylish jump. This hero knows how to show up at the right moments. He knew the creature wouldn't die with just that blow, so he ends up cutting it in the air, and again he does it with a lot of style. Fenrir gets excited since his master came to help them. Only the shell of these monsters has magical protection. If you had noticed that, you would have saved energy. He grabs her arm with the Gleipnir threads, and could even have prevented her from losing the arm. With those threads, he ends up joining them, and says that since her regeneration was slower, he needed to do that so she could recover. You made many mistakes, but the biggest one was not abandoning that city. Are you emotionally attached to it? The girl apologized for acting impulsively. No matter how many insects she defeated, she couldn't save that city. That's because the insects kept appearing, and there were many. However, now she could be calm, because he would take care of that matter. The monsters try to hit him with everything, and the witch behind all this celebrates, saying they fell into the trap. However, our boy hid in the shadows, and managed to reach where the witch was hiding. She was startled by that scene, and said it was very easy to find where she was. Our boy managed to use the threads to trap her. Even Sylphie was impressed, because the master was very strong, and no one even knew how Inori managed to get to the top of that mountain so fast. He was there, in front of the witch. Her name was Chris, and this person was very angry. I confess I still don't know if that is a man or a woman. Arya asks how this girl could control the monsters, and Inori said that was her secret ability. The girl could control magical beasts. The city of Regen was constantly attacked by monsters, and every time it was the church knights who solved it. The great hero Revan was crowned the city's hero for having great influence in that battle, and thanks to the supposedly divine protection of the church, they managed to keep control of the city. In other words, this girl was probably working with the church to attack the city. The witch starts laughing, saying he must have done great research. But that's not all. Really, that's not all I know yet. So I'll ask you directly what you are hiding. He uses the hypnotic eye, and the woman goes crazy, laughing and saying it's very interesting to see a magic circle, and even starts releasing dark mana around him. The mental interference hadn't worked, and she says she's very good at this kind of magic. The girl reveals she followed this man's words, but in the end she ended up being foolish. She shouldn't cooperate with that kind of scum, and, saying that, several creatures appear behind her. Our hero asks if she means she was cooperating with the church people, while those monsters came toward her. Arya screams, telling Inori to be careful, but our protagonist was cool, and manages to trap them all with his Gleipnir thread, and right after hits the monster's weak spot, and even shouts saying they were very predictable. However, there was a creature coming from above, as Arya said, and that's exactly what was happening. It seems the monster hits Inori squarely, and the witch even says the boy was turned into ground meat. However, he appeared from inside, splitting the monster in half. He was also drinking the monster's blood to recover his energy. Of course, the witch gets angry when she sees that scene, and still says the boy was blocking her path. She didn't have time to waste on him. She tried to move, and our hero said that if she pushed too hard, her arm would be torn off. All the monsters started coming back to our hero, trying to attack him at the same time. and Sylphie gets worried, saying so many monsters would be hard to defeat. However, they change course and start heading toward the city. It seems our hero noticed the witch's plan, and Arya keeps begging our hero to save the city. Even if they killed the witch, the monsters would continue with the mission, which was to destroy the whole place. I really thought it would be impossible to stop the monsters just by killing you. I admit I may have underestimated you. You are better than I thought. The monsters moved at an impressive speed, and the witch starts shouting, saying that even if she dies, her wish will be fulfilled, and still could only communicate with her sister through letters. In those letters, the sister said she was being chosen to become a church priestess. Our hero was listening to this story but felt no empathy at all, and the girl cries, telling that her sister was very proud to know that the older sister was doing well. Arya asks what happened to her little sister, and if she really managed to enter the church. However, the little sister ended up dying. She didn't know exactly how it happened, but Revan gave that news. She also said that her little sister was sacrificed to purify the corrupted soul of the older sister. He was basically blaming the girl for her sister's death, and still said that from now on she would have to do everything he ordered to pay for her sins. Logically, that was very traumatic for the girl. She was born with the power of black magic, and besides that, had to seek refuge inside the church. It seems her life was destined to suffer, until she found a man with a skull face. The man crouched, asking if she was also a summoner, just like him. She was inside a cage with a demon named Neon, and the man asked if she wanted power. With his help, she got out of that cage, and ended up making a contract with that man. She also ended up becoming a demon. She did this to be able to take revenge on Raven, and that's when she ended up being stopped by our hero. He asks who this Neon guy was, and the only thing she knew was that he was also a demon. Inori becomes thoughtful, wondering if this had anything to do with the shadows of darkness, but after thinking better, he thinks not. Now he would ask the last question. She had tried to take revenge on the city with those creatures, but ended up being stopped. That's because her life was very worn out, so he wanted to know if she was already satisfied with that revenge, or if she was still blinded by it. Arya realized that depending on the answer, the girl would be killed, and even begged Inori to wait and not do anything bad. Since he had asked a question, the girl should answer soon. He wanted to know if her revenge ended there. She starts to cry and can't answer. Arya begs him not to eliminate the girl. She even said that she was just being used by the church, but our hero feels no empathy. She asks if he could forgive her life, since she really hadn't killed anyone. Everything she did was motivated by revenge, because she had suffered a lot. Inori said he couldn't forgive her. There was no benefit in leaving her alive. Besides, she remained silent and didn't answer the question. She had lost all will to live. No matter how much Arya felt empathy for the girl, she no longer wanted to be alive. Understanding this, he falls silent. Holding the sword, he reached his conclusion. He was going to end her life. At that moment, he heard a voice saying, "You have reached level 15. Your demon ranking will be changed from Baron to Viscount," and he ends up losing consciousness. The girl runs to him, screaming his name. Inori ends up seeing a light shining, and when he opens his eyes, he is with that goddess from the beginning of the story. He was dizzy, not really understanding where he was. I thought it was the chief god's attack or something like that. "What is chief god, you said?" At that moment, Inori punched her in the belly. "I told you I was going to get revenge." He even asks why she sent that blonde hero to attack him, and also said it was very annoying to have to deal with that guy. The goddess looks a bit embarrassed. This was the place where he was summoned the other times, but it seems he was the only one who came there more than once. The woman changes the subject and asks if he hasn't heard he is now a Viscount, and that this is something very good. Viscount? Arya, was that you speaking in my head? Inori's power was acquired by traveling through many worlds. In the world where he was now, nobility and vampires had no rankings, so she had to manually adjust his ranking so he could level up. That's why he should be thankful. The guy makes a bored face and says this goddess must have a lot of free time. She said no, quite the opposite, already raising her hand above his head. "You leveled up all at once, didn't you?" When that happens, it's kind of complicated and you have to adjust manually, and even asks how he managed to level up so fast. Probably that meteor shower, he thinks. He will be able to see the details of the new skills he gained through the status window. And before leaving, she had one last warning. That chief god guy is a special case. Back in the other world, Arya was very worried. Fenris mentions that the young master was still breathing, so probably he only fainted from spending too much energy, maybe. But the real worry of the little wolf was having to deal with that witch alone. Arya looks at her and realizes the hypnosis hadn't worn off. She wasn't acting out of pure reason, but out of emotion. That's why she asked Inori to let the witch live. At that moment, someone arrives. She immediately turns, realizing it was someone dangerous, and who was there was the Demon King. The old man had a very suspicious look, and seeing it was the old Dongai guy, she got a little calmer. At that moment, Inori wakes up, and already draws his sword, asking what the old man was doing there. It was strange for him to appear, emanating so much magical power, and asks again why he came to that place. The old man looks down and sees all that destruction. He said the sound and the tremor reached the city, and they would arrive there early tomorrow to investigate, and still asks Inori if he would like Revan to reverse that damage. While the old man talked with Arya, Inori asked, "What do you mean? What do you want to say by that?" Then he asks again, "You want me to reverse everything? I think I didn't understand." The old man says the boy is young and kind of deaf like that. he could use his power to undo all that destruction, making the forest grow back again. Inori asks how much that will cost, and the old man says it's something very simple. The only thing he wanted was to talk with that young woman, and ends up pointing his finger at Arya. He was proposing this, but didn't know if it would really work. It had been a long time since he used his power, and he already sits down. Besides, he was nervous having a beautiful girl watching him, which made him embarrassed. Arya was suspecting all this, thinking this guy was not very trustworthy. Inori told her not to let her guard down with that witch, because she was still dangerous, and thinking better, he would take that woman with him. If things got complicated, he could blame the destruction on her. And turning to Arya, he talked about the old man's identity. What do you mean? His identity is just some old man who spends the whole day at the bar. Inori interrupts and says he will talk about that with the girl later. Meanwhile, the stones were moving, as if everything was restoring to the original state. Of course, she had never seen anything like that before, and even asks him how that could be possible. The old man keeps apologizing for messing up her hair. The stones begin to return to their right places, covering the hole caused by the explosion. Looking at the essence of that magic, she realizes it was black magic, and even begins to tremble all over. After fixing most of it, he said he would like to talk with her in a more private place, and asks to go to the nearest forest. The whole place had been restored, except for the magical beasts. She is paralyzed, and asks what Inori and Ignoa were, especially if they were from this world, because the power of the two was not normal at all. The old man gets all mysterious, and she asks again, who are you really? He ends up telling Arya that he is Inori, the former demon lord. Technically, he was the current demon lord too, but people assumed he was dead. If she didn't believe him, he could show his power to convince her, but just the fact he rebuilt that forest from scratch was enough. So he asks if they could sit and talk better with her. The girl, of course, gets all tense and trembles all over. He preferred she didn't get so suspicious like that, but considering her past, it was no surprise she was so scared. It seems the stories from 600 years ago still haunt people nowadays. She said that was true, and that everyone knows the fairy tale stories. He asks the young lady which noble house she came from. The girl is surprised, and he says that just by looking at her posture when sitting, it was already possible to tell that she was a noble from the northeast. He also wanted to know why she was hiding her true identity from that guy. She knew she couldn't fully trust the demon lord, and the guy apologized for interfering too much. But it was hard to believe that someone like her was traveling with the drunk that was Inori. That's why he became curious and decided to talk to her. The girl is surprised, and after waiting a bit, said she could be sure of one thing. She was serving Inori. When she was on the brink of death, Inori made a proposal to her. He asked if she accepted death or if she should stray from humanity's path and live with him. The guy gets really close to her and asks if it was Inori who made that offer. She ends up startled. From that moment on, her life changed completely. He had saved her life, turning her into a vampire. He also gave her freedom since she was no longer bound to that kingdom. And although Inori seemed weak sometimes, he also seemed very strong. That's why she felt a lot of gratitude. And it was even confusing to describe that feeling. She was about to admit that she liked him, but the Demon King ends up interrupting, telling her not to put simple words on that feeling, since a lot was happening in her life. She didn't need to force an answer. Besides, he asks something hard to express in words, leaving the girl all embarrassed. She realized the Demon King knew she liked Inori. Confirming his suspicions, he said he knew she liked him. How do you know how I feel? But the old man said Inori didn't see her the same way. Do you know what he thinks while traveling with you? It seems you girls still don't understand the true nature of who he really is. The true nature of Inori? That boy will one day destroy the world. He will destroy everything. One day he will reach the point of individual existence and become complete as a being. And that is inevitable. The girl is confused, not exactly understanding what he means. There's no doubt he likes you, but what he sees is your future. And he ends up showing that first manga scene. Exactly. That scene where he ends up getting stabbed by her. And the old man also said Inori was unconsciously drawn to her. That's because she is the only one who can stop him. Arya asks if she really is the only one who can kill him, and wanted to know what that meant, but that was just a possibility. It was not 100% certain. She is doubtful, but does not rule out the chance it really happens. She even thinks that, if she caught him by surprise, she could defeat him, but it's just giving an order, and he would stop. Holding a cigar, he told her to think about that. Having time to worry about these things is the privilege of youth. The girl asks if she really has that potential. The old man was almost leaving, then he comes back. After seeing her comfort, he lost hope that she would ever reach him. She even thinks she won't be able to surpass Inori's power. The old man approaches her and asks if the young woman was alright. Maybe Inori was growing more and more inside her mind, and that's why she sees him as an extremely powerful master. But now he was still just an incomplete boy. It seems she grasped those wise words. The man said a baby cries when hungry, and when wanting the mother's milk. The boy grew up safe and comfortable in the house of someone who had raised him. He started studying and acquiring knowledge, and even his abilities were granted when he arrived in this world. What Inori created by himself is practically nothing. Everything was given to him, and that's why he looks for an opposite force to improve himself. The true self of Inori was still settling, and the same goes for you, girl. He asks if she had never worked for money before, and that she must not have gone through many hardships in life. She remembers she was a princess, and when she arrived in this city she was very welcomed, and says it's true that she never lacked for anything. The old man says he had been hungry, and she doesn't believe it. Blowing the cigar smoke, he told her not to worry so much about Inori, since she had the strength to rival him, and if he does something she doesn't like, she should oppose him. Being a girl who does everything he wants is not what he really seeks, and when she starts opposing him, that will be the first step to expanding her own potential. And he keeps repeating to her to oppose Inori. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking this guy is our hero's father. Maybe this is obvious, but I wasn't smart enough to realize it before. Still smoking the cigar, he said Inori will be happy to have a strong girl like her. She asks if it would be okay if she went against Inori's plan, and wanted to know if by chance Inori and the old man were working together. When the guy looks at the girl, he remembers the past, when he committed atrocities in search of happiness. Then he said he doesn't mind if she opposes the boy, and also says she should live however she wants. He had only met her to give some advice, and was already saying goodbye. She mentions that this old man scolds Inori, but at the same time praises him, and it even seemed like his father. I said it, guys, I really think this guy is Inori's father. That's why he had such a powerful soul that traveled between worlds. The demon lord went to our world, had a son, and that son is our hero. This is not a spoiler, guys, it's just a theory. After saying goodbye, she reflects on the old man's words. Upon arriving home, he thinks that Inori completely restored the forest. His power was so great he could even influence living beings. The girl arrives home and apologizes for being late. Since Inori talked a lot, she realizes Inori was acting strange, and the witch was tied up. He wanted to talk to her about the treatment he was going to give the witch, but it didn't need to be now. Arya keeps staring at Inori and says she has a proposal to make to him. At the church, the final exam was happening. They were congratulating the Templar candidates who passed the test. They were chosen by the gods to grow within the church, and the fanatic was very happy to be one of the chosen, and got shy while making a very cute speech. They should be aware that their bodies no longer belong to them, but to God, and even asked if they were prepared to become the shield that protects the people from monsters. They started agreeing, saying they had become the divine shield as apostles of God. Soon after, he asks if they will support the believers and fully dedicate themselves to them. They agree, saying they will offer themselves in salvation in the name of God. The guy gives a malicious smile, and starts saying it's wonderful to hear that from their own mouths. The shameless old men seem to be enjoying that scene. As church members, all were before the girls making a vow of devotion, but the fanatic found it very strange. They were surrounded by several men who end up locking the door. A commotion starts, and she, being smart, already realizes something is wrong. Also, she hears a strange noise outside. She tells Captain Revan that something is wrong, and at that moment her friend begins to be possessed. She quickly turns and manages to dodge that spell. The men behind that magic said the fanatic was very cunning. It was a binding magic, and she noticed her friends had fallen unconscious on the ground. They were without consciousness. She already grabs her weapon and transforms it into Andrita's sacred hammer. About to attack them, she asks what the hell they were doing, and the old men all start trembling. She strikes Revan's protective barrier with the hammer. She knew that guy was extremely strong, and he says it is a blessing granted by the great Church of God, and condemns the fanatic priestess's attitude. He was using a red jewel, and that ended up turning into his weapon while he told her to humbly accept her body. At that moment, the girl realized that guy was crazy, and before she knew it, she took a hit in the stomach. And all the evil those guys do, they say it is in the name of the church. And so we end this first part, guys. I'm almost sure that Ignoa the Demon King is Inori's father. I don't know about you, but my favorite character is the Gothic vampire. Comment down below if you like this work. There are still many chapters to come. If there are lots of comments, I'll bring the continuation soon. That's it then. Thanks. See you later, everyone.